Hello and welcome, this is Rooflemonger, and today I'll be covering the, well, frankly, leaked patch notes for Street Fighter V Arcade Edition, aka Season 3. So these were posted earlier in the day in Japan and have since been pulled back. They took away the patch notes, and Capcom issued a statement saying these may not be the final changes, but Capcom being Capcom, who knows, honestly. They may be further changes yet, I don't know. If so, I'll make another video. But for now, I'll have this as our base video. And one thing before I go into any further detail, I will note, maybe due to translation issues or whatever, but there's a few things here to say. A move has adjusted collision during movement, which honestly doesn't mean nothing to me, so I will just be skipping that. And more than a few moves say their hitbox or hurtbox has been changed, with no context for the change. So unless I can, posit a guess, negative or positive what the change would be, I'm just going to be skipping over those because I can't give you any context or really opinion on the matter. So without any further ado, let's go into it, and let's start with the general system changes. And quickly, right before the system changes, which are small, but I will leave a link to the complete breakdown of the patch notes in the video description if you want to check them out in full for your own perusal. Now that said, the system changes are both pretty small. It's two of them. First up, throws. So throws normally have 2 active frames to grab you. So they now have 3 active frames. So this is a fairly big deal. This, affects everyone positively, It's not a nerf by any stretch. There's going to be a lot of setups on knockdown where that 3rd active frame now can grab someone on their wake up where it couldn't before. So for Oki setups, that's pretty big. And for just general play, it's all around a big buff because everyone wants to get their basic throws in. And the other one, and this is a big change across the board, is the V-trigger activation. So let's just turn on our attack data here. So, as you probably well know, the more hits in a combo, the more the combo scales. And if you were to, say, trigger activate, the trigger counts as 10% of the scaling. So the first hit we did trigger, we did our second hit in the combo, and now we're at 80%. So now, and I'll just do this one more time to elucidate. Well, I'll try it one more time, sorry. So 80%, now the trigger activation counts as 2 hits of scaling instead of 1. So in this situation right here, I'd actually be at 70% for my second hit, not at 80%. So for a lot of people who rely on, 1 hit into trigger activation into combo, it's going to be a big nerf for them, like, say a balrog or something, who very critically relies on that. That's going to be a big overall damage nerf. It's going to start their damage scaling much further down the chain than they normally would. So this change is universal. It affects pretty much almost every character in the game. Like, almost everyone wants to trigger activate off a hit into a combo at some point or another, especially now with everyone getting a new trigger. So it is universal, and it's a kind of a damage buff across, or sorry, a damage nerf across the board, but it's not going to be that big of a damage nerf. It'll stop, a balrog from squeezing out that last bit of damage, but other than that, it's going to affect everyone equally, and it's not too big of a deal in the end. Now, with that said, let's go into the character specifics, and we'll start with Ryu. Now, first up for Ryu, change-wise, is his forward throw. Forward throw actually got a buff for stun damage. It now does, as you see here, 120 stun. It now will be changed to 150 stun damage. So it'll just be that much easier to get a dizzy on your foe. It says circumstances for landing it have been changed. I'm assuming that means you might be a little further away just to keep away throw pressure, because they definitely want to get away from throw loops this season, it would seem. Next up, we have standing light punch. So it says here that the pushback on hit and block has been increased. Now, in and of itself doesn't mean much, but I do worry that it might affect one of his counter hit combos. So normally in counter hit you can go something like this and get a 3-hit combo, and if the pushback is too much, and I see here it only hit with the tip of the crouch medium punch, it might not be able to work anymore. So we don't know for sure, but something to keep in mind. Crouching medium kick pushback on hit has been increased, just like standing light punch. And this is one of those things where it says the hitbox has been changed. We can't know for sure one way or the other, but I hope to God it is just so it extends further out, because, it's pretty pitiful as it stands. So we can just play some classic Street Fighter 2 Ryu, crouch medium kick, and the fireball. Don't know for sure. Unfortunately, there's no images or anything like that, but one can hope. Back fierce kick, the startup used to be 9 frames for the first hit, and has now been changed to 8 frames, so it is 1 frame faster. And if you V-trigger cancel the second hit, you'll have additional frame advantage, so new combos will be possible. Forward fierce punch, that's the solar plexus. Instead of doing 90 damage, has now been nerfed to 80 damage overall. Not really sure why that's been changed. The last thing Ryu needs is damage nerfs, but there you go. EX Hadoken. Used to be 44 frames from start to finish. The move now takes 42 frames from start to finish. There is no change on hit stun or block stun. Your pluses, your negatives, all that, it's still exactly the same. The move, the whole animation is just 2 frames faster now. Now, the Hadoken in V-Trigger has been changed quite a bit. So as you know, in and of itself, the move is different. It does 70 damage normally versus the 60 does without trigger, and you can charge it to multiple levels. So, all of them are now 42 frames. There's no differential in the startup or the total frame animation for light, medium, or heavy. The level 1 version, so the smallest charge possible, the damage has been changed from 70, the base, to 80. And the block stun, so if you did it point blank, it used to be punishable on block up close. It is now safe on block at -2. At a level 2 charge, the damage has been increased from 90 to 100, and it is 0 on block. So it's completely neutral on block, so if you're in someone's faces, you can at the very least do stand light punch, and you would trade at that point. And the level 3, which is the full charge, has now been upped the damage from 120 to 130. And there's no change of guard stun because it breaks guard. Now, if you were to do EX Hadoken in trigger, so just like the base move, the animation was shortened a little bit. Same deal here. So it was 43 frames, and now we'll go down to 40 frames flat. And once again, the negative, positive on hit, on block damage, all that's all the same. The move just takes less time to animate overall. Shoryuken and EX Shoryuken in V-Trigger, both of them say that their juggle points have been relaxed, meaning you may be able to get some extra juggles afterwards, and maybe, I don't know for sure because we don't have the base game here, but maybe you might be able to do a Ken-style LP Shoryu into EX Shoryu if you manage to catch them jumping. Also, for the EX version, it says the stun value has been changed from 250 on hit to 200, so that's a stun damage nerf. I'm not sure why that's the case, but that's what it says. And finally, we have Jodan Sokutu Gary, aka the Donkey Kick. That will be his new move. It looks pretty good. Hopefully one of the main uses is you don't have to worry about if the foe is standing or crouching in a combo. So, you know, get your Tatsus in a combo or something like that. Hopefully you can just kind of just get whatever combo you want. Standing or crouching, not really with standing. But we'll see. But it has a good hitbox at the very least. It hits very high up and hits quite low as well. From what we've seen from the stills and from early footage. So there you go. And overall, I'd say not too much of a big change. That stand light punch change, if the pushback is true and it ruins the counter hit combo, that's kind of a really big nerf. And so a little bit of a buff while in V-Trigger 1. But overall, kind of Ryu's where he left off. He's not going to be that much better. Unless that crouch medium kick hitbox is really extended out so he can play, you know, some classic Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 4 Ryu. It's not going to be too much different. He's going to be basically in the same place in the tier list he was before, at least in my opinion. Now, for Ken. Ken, the first change we have here is that his forward walk speed has been increased. It doesn't say by how much, but any walk speed increase is always a big deal, and it's definitely a big net buff for a walk speed increase. Everyone could benefit from it, and Ken, being an aggressive character, could benefit a bit more than most as well. Next up, Ken's forward throw. The damage has been increased. It does 100 damage currently, and has been increased to 110. So, you know, damage buff, not big one, but still any little bit helps. And it says here, circumstances after landing the throw have been changed. I'm assuming that means, especially in the corner, the pushback will be much further out to get rid of stuff like throw loops. Standing light punch, the pushback on hit and block has been increased. I'm assuming it's a bit like Ryu, maybe it might be getting rid of counter hit combos. It might screw with this, I don't know. That's definitely a very key Ken combo, the stand light punch into the back medium punch target combo, because, you know, that's how you get a lot of damage. Hopefully it doesn't mess with that, but it does seem it might get rid of at least some couple of counter hit combos, so, you know, beware, I guess. Stand medium punch is now +2 on block instead of +1, so it can definitely help with this frame trap game a little bit, because +1 on block, you know, can't argue plus frames on block, but it isn't too much, and +2 will definitely open up some possibilities. Now, stand medium kick says the pushback on hit has been changed. Now, it doesn't say if that's for the worse or for the better. I'm assuming it'll probably affect the target combo, and If it's for the worst, you might get pushed out and not combo, versus if it's for the better, you know, it might be a little easier to connect, but it does not state, sadly, which way. So, assume the worst, hope for the best. Jumping Heavy Punch has 1 frame faster startup, so it starts up normally in 9 frames. It is now starting up in 8 frames, so it's a bit quicker for your heavy jumping. So Forward Fierce Kick, that's the overhead here, Thunder Kick, has been changed so the first active frame can no longer hit crouching opponents. So the second active frame and beyond can hit crouchers just fine, but basically it's 1 more frame leeway for either the foe to block or to jab you out or do whatever to stop the move. Now next up is all the Shoryus. So all the Shoryus, light, medium, heavy, and EX have been changed. So the light version does 100 base damage, has been increased to 110 base damage, and while on V trigger, it did 120, and now has been changed to 130. The medium does 120 normally, has been changed to 130, and the trigger version has gone from 140 to 150 damage. The heavy version does 130 normally, has been changed to 140, and the trigger version does 150 normally, has been up to 160. And finally, the EX version does 150 normally, has been changed to 160, and the G trigger version does 170, has been changed to 180. So it's a 10 damage boost across the board. All of the versions will do 10 more damage. And as for the EX Shoryu, it says here, when an airborne opponent gets hit by it, they can now flip out. So I'm assuming that just means for, especially for corner combos with EX Shoryu, it's going to remove the Oki aspect, as they'll land on their feet and they can start fighting back right away. So the medium Tatsu, Hurricane Kick here, has a bunch of changes. So it all depends on if the first hit doesn't connect. So on the regular version, if the first hit doesn't connect, the second or third hit that does will now do 40 damage instead of 20. And that's just basically a straight damage buff. And the V-trigger version here, if the first hit does not connect, the second or third hit will now do 50 damage instead of 30. So the first hit doesn't connect, you know, you're going to get very low damage here. You see 20 is basically negligible. And, you know, 40 ain't going to be much more damage. But it's something. So it's just a damage buff if you don't get your first hit in, but you're trying to either juggle with it or, you know, you went for it and it missed. The secondary hits will at least do more damage. Now here it says Heavy Tatsu, the first active frame of the move startup has been removed. So you can basically consider it starting at, you know, the base version right now is starting at frame 2. It's a bit of an odd change. I'm a fan just because I play a lot of big characters and I find this move very annoying against big characters, but I'm not really sure of the consequences of what that will mean in full. I'm not a Ken main, but it is what it says here. So the first active frame is gone, so basically the move will start on frame 2. And the final change we have here is that the airborne EX Tatsu, that's the dive kick right here, the enemy will have 3, or rather Ken will have 3 more recovery frames if the opponent blocks the move. Meaning that, you know, you really got to be sure it hits, because you're going to basically be always negative on block now with, unless you hit the exact tip of their toes. So it's a bit of an annoyance for Ken, but the move is always a bit YOLO. Most people, you know, just kind of toss it out. So it's kind of there to discourage exactly that. Now, that said, all in all, I think Ken, it's a bit of a buff. The one thing I'm worried about, just like Ryu, is that stand light punch change. I'm not really sure how much that can change, depending on what that pushback is. If it gets rid of this target combo, then that's massive. The pushback would have to be pretty extreme for it to get rid of that. But overall, I think, you know, slight damage buffs. Jump heavy punches a bit faster, that's good. And overall, he's slightly better than he used to be, in my opinion anyways. Chun-Li is next up on deck, and I gotta say that one of the first changes here, the /back command normal here for the medium punch has been buffed much for the better. So I know it doesn't seem like a big deal here. It does 60 damage. The damage has been increased to 65, and in trigger it does 70 damage, and the damage has been buffed to 75. So it's only 5 damage, sure, but this is one of her main moves here for poking, and she's gonna be tossing the slot in any matchup for the most part. And it's where, you know, a good chunk of damage is going to come from. So the fact that it has any damage buff at all on such a critical move is a very big deal. Now, keeping that positivity train running from the first move, The forward fierce kick is now a crush counter. This was already one of her better moves, as it carried her forward quite a bit, had a lot of good range, and normally, depending on your spacing, you can combo to it anyways. So now with it being a crush counter, more than likely, just like the stand heavy kick, you're going to be able to dash forward and do stand medium into crouch medium into bird kick, upping its damage potential immensely. And like I already said, this, just like the forward medium punch, is one of her key moves in neutral, and the fact that the damage value is now potentially going to skyrocket upwards with a crush counter, big buff for Chun-Li. Her back heavy kick command normal, this guy right here, the damage has been upped from 70 to 80, and it states that the hitbox has been changed to be able to hit people basically trying to cross her up as well. So this move, you know, normally it was a decent anti-air, then they got nerfed in Season 2, and it was still good at hitting people at this very specific angle, and the hitbox has been changed to hit cross-ups as well. It's a very big deal, and now she has a very reliable anti-air with it. Her V-Trigger activation time for V-Trigger 1 has been extended. In Season 2 it was nerfed, so she had less time overall, and now has been rebuffed. I don't know if it's to the exact same extent, but it has been buffed, so the timer will last longer again. Once again, big net buff for Chun-Li. Light and medium lightning legs have now had their frame advantage upped from 3 frames to 4 frames. Now, if you're just doing this in the air like that, you know, it's not going to make a difference. This is specifically for instant air legs. So, in Season 1, you used to be able to go instant air legs, crouch light punch into the usual bird kick combo. Now, in Season 2, you can't do that, unfortunately, because of the nerf. But now you're going to be able to do it again. So, since crouch light punch is 4 frames, you just do the instant air legs as you would, and you can go right into the combo as it is, and you basically get a big damage buff to instant air legs. Now, it's still negative on block. That's not being changed. So, you can't just go crazy with it like you could in Season 1, and it was definitely one of the most hated moves in Season 1 to be sure, exactly for that reason. But now, at least, if you get it, you can get some decent damage off of it. And finally, the bird kick. So, all bird kicks across the board now do 10 more damage. So, this is both for the regular version and the trigger version. So, light kick normally does 100, will now do 110, and trigger does 110, will do 120. Medium kick does 120, will now do 130, and same for the trigger, does 130, 140, and so on with the heavy kick, does 140, will do 150, and trigger does 150, will do 160. So all in all, these are across the board buffs for Chun-Li. It's pretty good. Her damage is slightly up across the board. The poke damage is good. The addition of a new crush counter move on a button she's going to be using anyways in neutral is really big. I don't know if she's quite as dominant as her Season 1 self, but her Season 1 self was pretty much the best character in the game. So, you know, anything up from what she is in Season 2 is definitely a big buff, and she definitely has that. These are big buffs for her, and she'll definitely help her placement up on the tier list because of it. So, for Birdie, first up here, let's talk about Crouch Light Punch. It says the pushback on hit and block has been increased. Now, more than some of the other characters here, like I said, I'm worried it might screw up some counter hit combos. But for Birdie, this counter hit combo is actually super key, and that sound light kick hits at the very end of like its hitbox after the crouch light punch, so it might be a dead combo at this point. If true, it's very unfortunate. It's a very good counter hit combo for Birdie. You know, you have 3 hits to confirm, and if not, you know, you can just sit and chill. And if it's blocked, you know, you're still in range to threaten a walk forward and pile driver. And overall, if that counter hit combo is dead, that's kind of a big nerf to Birdie. Now, next up, this is a bit of a universal nerf. All his command grabs, killing head, and this includes the EX version as well, are going to have 8 more frames of recovery on whiff. So if you miss the move, the enemy's going to have that much more time to get their punish in on you. And now, speaking of the EX version, on top of that nerf, EX killing head will no longer be throw invincible. Now, this is a fairly big nerf, because, you know, very few characters have throw invincible moves, and, you know, this was Birdie's, you know, get out of jail throw option. And so, as far as it comes to EX command throws, only Zangief now retains any throw invincibility on an EX command throw. Now, heavy punch bullhead actually got a bit of a buff. So as it stands right now, it does 120 damage. It has now been buffed to 140 damage. And if you're in trigger, it does 144. It'll now do 168. So it's basically 20 more damage for the regular version, and 24 damage for the trigger version. So you can't really argue it. You know, significant damage buff. Pretty good to have. Now for the bullhorn, I know a lot of Akuma fans, after watching Capcom Cup, they've been crying for this move to be nerfed. It got a small nerf. So when he does this move, he actually pulls back a little bit and it reduces his hurtbox. So the distance he pulls back has been decreased. So he'll be a bit closer to the enemy when it starts. So it may be easier to throw him versus where a throw would whiff normally. But other than that, the move retains all of its normal properties. It'll still be airborne after a while. It still retains its projectile invincibility. So the reasons you would use this move are still for the most part going to be intact. You can't abuse the backstep of it as much, but it's still going to be very good. So if you're one of those people who are crying for its head, it still maintains a lot of its functionality. And that said, overall, Birdie, he's mostly in the same place he was before. The command grab nerf sucks, but everyone's going to get hit with that. The biggest thing of the ones presented I'm most worried about is the counter hit jab combo. That guy right there. Because if he is going to lose that, that's it's pretty much his best counter hit combo, because that's off a quick move. He has a good amount of damage off of it for counter hit light. So we'll see where that one lands. I really hope that doesn't go. But overall, he's slightly nerfed, but what made him good is still there. So for people calling for Birdie's heads, he didn't get the nerfs you wanted, I'm sorry to say. And for the people who realize, Birdie wasn't fine to begin with, well, he's still going to be fine. For Cammy, her forward and back throw have been changed. So forward throw used to do an outrageous 200 stun, so that has been nerfed to 150 stun. Still a very fair amount, but the 200 stun, it's a bit much, so that's been clipped back a bit. Now her back throw used to do 130 damage, now it does 140, so the damage is a bit higher there. And her air throw has now also had increased damage. It does 130 currently, and will now do 150 damage, so 20 damage buff. Standing light punch, like some other characters, now has increased pushback on hit and block, meaning potentially it might ruin some counter hit combos. We'll have to see the details of that pushback. It also has 3 frame startup instead of 4 frames when you cancel into it, so meaning if you rapid fire, jab cancel into it, the rapid fire will now have a quicker startup. Stand medium kick, that's our classic poke, now has quicker recovery on whiff. So if you whiff the move, it would have 18 frames of recovery. It has now been changed to 15 frames of recovery. So her feet are, safely back on the ground a couple frames quicker to help stop getting poked out when you whiff. So 2 big changes here to stand heavy kick. One, it says here, it can hit opponents that are behind Cammy as well. So it has a bit of an anti-cross-up hitbox now, I'm assuming. And the hit stun has been changed from +2 on hit to +4, meaning something like this would now combo naturally. So having extra hit stun's really good, because now it has a whole bunch of combo avenue routes it never had before. Now, much like stand light punch, the crouching light punch, pushback on hit and block has been increased. So once again, may potentially mess with some counter hit combos or some regular combos even. We'll have to see how it lies when the game actually comes out. And much like the crouching light punch, crouch light kick, same deal, pushback on hit and on block has been increased. So an interesting change here in that her V skill, the spin knuckle, used to be +6 on hit, is now +7 on hit. So on a regular hit, it means now you can just go right into crouch medium kick. But on a counter hit, if we're to connect, you can go right into stand heavy kick and into the new stand heavy kick combos. So, it's rare you're going to be fishing for a counter hit V skill to be sure, but now its combo ability has gone up due to the 1 frame change, so that's pretty handy to have. Now, Cammy's V reverse got a pretty big nerf, so it is now -4 on block instead of -2, meaning her V reverse is a punishable on block move. Like, yeah, it crossed up, and it got her out of the corner, so, it was a bit more useful than most V reversals. But now the fact that it's punchable on block -4, everyone in the game, even like Abigail with all his slowness, can still punish that with a crouch light kick. And to, Abigail punches or something like that. So everyone in the game now can give her a punish for a blocked V reverse. So you really gotta mean it when you do it now. And our final change here, it's a bit of a give and take. The V trigger. So V trigger, her active times have been extended, meaning that the bar is going to drain much slower than you see right now. But the moves in trigger now take up more bar. Honestly, I bet it'll probably mount to roughly the same thing here, because if the drain's going to be slower, you always get 2 uses no matter what. And, unless you use one, then you let the bar drain out. But if the drain's going to be much slower, well, we'll see. But roughly, I bet it's going to be not too big of a deal either way. And either for positive or for negative, it's going to be roughly close to what we have right now. Now that said, overall cammy, I'd say buffs for sure. The forward throw stun hurts, but you know, her forward throw stun was ridiculous. She is definitely one of the characters more prone to get the dizzy in the corner because of that. But overall, you know, cammy seems to be mostly impervious to any real nerfs. If she gets any nerfs like Season 2 with the dive kick nerfs, she gets buffs to, you know, make up for it. Cammy's definitely always been a Capcom favorite, it seems, and she's definitely going to be very strong still in Street Fighter V Arcade Edition. Now, on to Zangief. The first thing here says all normal throws. There's no damage buffs this time, but all of them circumstances after successfully landing these moves have been changed, which almost universally would mean that you're either going to be pushed much further back in the corner or just much further back overall. Now, that said here, let's go into Standing Light Punch. So it says here, if the opponents are hit by this move while airborne, they will now move further away from Zangief. So if you manage to either catch them trying to jump because they're scared of a pile driver, or use this as a jab anti-air, they're going to be further away, so there's no more doing that and then going for your pile driver attempt. Standing Light Kick has less recovery on whiff, so it used to have 15 frames recovery on whiff, now we'll have 12 frame recoveries, so not the hugest change in the world, but you know, you're less likely to get tagged just for tossing it out. Now on to Crouching Light Punch. This is the biggest deal probably anywhere across the board. So damage has been increased, so you know, that's nice. So did 30, now we'll do 40. The active frames have increased from 2 to 3, so it's easier to hit people, especially on their wake up. The total move frames have been adjusted, so it is now 14 frames for the move from start to end instead of 12. Now this has no effect on plus or minus or anything, it's just if you whip the move, it takes 14 total frames of animation. Now here's where the big changes are. So the move is plus 3 frames instead of plus 4 frames on hit, so that means it doesn't combo into itself anymore. So that's really big, because you know, the fact that you can combo into itself to keep people scared was really huge, and now that's just not going to be able to work the same way anymore. It will no longer combo into itself unless you manage to hit it on counter hit. So that really screws up with a lot of his pressure. You know, he doesn't get much damage off jabs anyway, so the fact that you get the follow-up was, you know, one of the few little things he could get, and now he no longer can do that. Crouching Light Kick is no longer special cancelable, so no more shenanigans where you go crouch light kick into bear grab or nothing like that. And once again, since this was changed to plus 3 and not plus 4 on hit, this is no longer a natural combo as well. Now this next one, it hurts no matter what, but it really hurts what I like to term fraud Zangiefs. So knee hammer, that's forward medium kick, now has 3 extra frames of recovery when he lands. Now this move, it doesn't matter if it hits, you know, it's going to be the same plus or minus no matter what, but it now is 3 frames slower once it lands, meaning if you use this as your go-to to get in for your pile drivers, and that's your only way in, and you don't really have a neutral game to work your way in normally, that's a massive nerf, and it might destroy you. For normal Zangief players, you know, it really sucks, because it's a decent tool, but for Zangief players, and that's all they know, how to get in, that's a crippling blow to be sure. Now, as for the pile drivers, universal nerf holds true here, 8 frames more recovery on all whiffs. And it says here Zangief's movement on whiff has been changed, but it doesn't specify what exactly that is. Maybe he moves closer, could move further away, I'm not sure. But yeah, of all the command grab characters, he was the most defined by the command grab, so this definitely hurts a lot for him. Now, as for the lariat, it says here 5 frames of recovery have been added, and that's hit, whiff, or block, doesn't matter. 5 frames of recovery have been added, and if so, honestly, that's just a straight nerf, and kind of senseless if you ask me. If you did complain about Zangief, it definitely wasn't the lariat was the reason you were complaining about it, but overall, it's a big nerf. Now, Tundra Storm, this was his new move added in Season 2, that's the counter. The startup has changed, so it is now 2 frames from 4 frames, so it starts up 2 frames quicker. And in essence, it kind of makes it the fastest move in the game, because normally moves aren't faster than 3 frames, but this one is 2 frames. And if the move connects, it'll now do 300 stun instead of 250, so that's really big. It really rewards the correct counter guess. And the command has been changed, so it'll now be Dragon Punch motion and 2 punches instead of 1 punch. This is, I'm assuming, to change the fact that, you know, if you're walking forward and you try to quickly crouch and jab out, you know, sometimes if your motion wasn't, fluid and perfect, you can accidentally get the Dragon Punch motion, which will give you this. So with 2 punches, it'll totally remove that possibility. Now, it has 10 frames of recovery more when whiffed. Not really sure why. This isn't a command grab, but it's getting that nerf. Can't be special canceled into, which is fine. You don't want to special cancel into it. If you did, it was a mistake, to be sure. It says here, his movement on whiff has been adjusted, so it means he's either going to be moving a little bit more forward, a bit more backwards. I'm not sure, as it does not specify. And our final change here is, from the V trigger, you'll gain more meter if the move connects. Now, overall, I gotta say, this is big nerfs to Zangief. I know some people complain about Zangief, and Zangief, he had his fair share of matches where he made the other people really sweat, but he also had his fair share of matches where he suffered terribly. And I think a lot of these nerfs are honestly kind of uncalled for, especially stuff like the Lariat nerf. Crouch Light Punch is such a big part of his game, and now it can't combo into itself. Like, yeah, the individual hit will do more damage, but I'm sure most people would rather, remain combo okay. Stuff like the Universal Command Grab nerf, yeah, it affects everyone with him, but, he's defined by it more than any other character in the game, so that really stings. And overall, he's definitely a worse character for it. Now, for Charlie, both his forward throw, back throw, and air throw have all been buffed. So the forward throw normally does 120, will now do 130, 10 damage buff. The back throw does 130, will now do 140. And the aerial throw also did 130, will now do 140. So it's a small damage buff, but a lot of the throws were nerfed in Season 2 for damage. So to get any of that damage back is always a big buff. Standing medium kick has now had its active frames increased from 3 frames to 4 frames. So, honestly, the main use for this, I think, it's up its value as an anti-air. Having extra active frames is always good for an anti-air, and it was always decent at, a very specific angle of anti-air, especially, after Crouch Medium Punch, kind of got nerfed and didn't become the be-all, end-all anti-air that it was in Season 1. So, it's a bit more value to this, having more active frames, and be slightly easier to swap people out of the air with it on a very far jump arc. Now, that said, Stand Heavy Kick also got its damage boosted, so it does 80, will now do 90 damage. So 10 damage buff, and is another anti-air possible move depending on the angle and the jump and you want to stop. So, as always, more damage is always more better. Can't really argue its effectiveness. Crouching Medium Kick has now faster recovery. So if the move whiffs, it has 17 frames of recovery. It has now been changed to 15 frames of recovery. Now, this does not change if the move hits on hit or block. So the numbers on that are still exactly the same, but if it whiffs, it recovers 2 frames faster, so his feet will return and he's a little less punishable for whiffing it now. Now, bullet combination. First up, the move will now give you more V gauge if it connects, and that's nice. More V gauge is always nice. Now, it does say here, the circumstances on hit have been changed. Now, as for what that means, I can't tell you. It doesn't say what circumstance, so the third hit could be special cancelable now. Maybe it could cause a juggle state, who knows. This is part of the reason why we're waiting for the English patch notes, because, it could be one of a multitude of things. Now, EX Sonic Boom has a fairly interesting change. The base move is the same as it was, but the second follow-up, when you hit another button, that boom actually has differing speeds now. So, as it stands, the boom speed is the same no matter what button you press, but now the speed will be changed depending on what button you follow up with. So I'm assuming, light will be a slower projectile, heavy will be a faster projectile, and I'm assuming, conjecture, but I'm assuming the medium will probably be the same what it is currently. But the fact that you can change it up at all, will give them more interesting patterns to zone with. You can screw up people just trying to jump over it or just standing and blocking it. Potentially, if the light punch one's slow enough to follow up with, you can, dash behind it or get some pressure with it. We don't know the exact distances and all that involved, but, it's something he doesn't have currently, so any change up to the game plan there, is nice to have. Now, it says here for Medium Sonic Scythe and Judgment Saber, that's the super, that the juggle points have been relaxed, meaning you can now juggle with these in situations where you couldn't before, like, say, something like this. Now, that's one example. I'm sure this plays into more to his second V-trigger, because the second new V-trigger has stuff where he can totally launch you big time, like a Terry Bogard, power slam, power dunk, and launch you up in the air. So for that, I'm sure that's where these really come into play, but there might be some new situations, like even, off basic you know, HK side switch into juggle, that might not have worked before. Now, all this said, overall, you know, it's a net buff for Nash, but it's not too big of a buff. The juggle stuff is nice. The bullet combination, depending on what that buff is, it could be huge. The circumstances have been changed on that buff. Not really sure. He does a bit more damage across the board, is nice. The EX Fireball change is potentially very interesting, but as it stands, it's not much of a big buff, and I don't see him really climbing the tier list much, unfortunately. Now, for Bison changes, the first one we have here is a very potentially huge change, and it says his forward walk speed has been increased. Now, if you all know Bison, I'm sure you do at this point, his walk speed is atrocious. So any walk speed increase is really big, especially for someone like me. I used to play Bison in all the older Street Fighters, and the whole reason I don't play him in this game is because of his walk speed. I'm sure it won't be like how it used to be in Street Fighter 2 or 4, where, you know, he's basically the fastest character in the game. But anything to help that really small or slow turtle crawl here is definitely a big help. Now let's talk about the throws. So the forward throw got a big buff. So it does 20 more damage. It normally does 110, will now do 130, and the stun does 120, will now do 170, which is a very large increase. And since here circumstances after landing have been changed, I'm assuming he'll just be pushed further back, which is fine. Bison doesn't really need much pressure after the forward throw, because he already had the back throw, which is why that one's being nerfed. So you've probably seen that setup before, back throw in the Psycho Axe, and, you know, unless you got an invincible move, you're not really doing much about it. So the back throw now does 10 less damage, does 140 currently, will do 130, and the stun has been decreased from 170 to 150. So since you already got the setup after the throw, I feel they didn't need quite as much damage or as much stun, since you already got quite a bit off it anyways. Stand Light Punch has got a little bit of a buff. Stand Light Kick got a little bit of a nerf. So Stand Light Kick used to be +2 on hit, it is now +0 on hit, and it used to be plus on block, it is now negative on block. It used to be +2 on block, it is now -2 on block. So it's nice that it got buffed to 3 frames and all, but it is now going to be much less of a dominant button, unfortunately. Stand Heavy Kick says that the pushback on block has been increased. So depending on the pushback, could be pretty big, but I don't think it'll be too much push. But we'll have to see. If the pushback is significant, it can ruin a lot of his frame traps, because, you know, the move is +3 on block. But we'll have to see until the game comes out, unfortunately. His V skill got a nice little buff, so if you absorb a physical hit, not a projectile, but a physical hit, you will gain more V gauge than normal. So it's not, you know, a giant buff, but Bison's definitely a guy who wants that trigger, so getting more V gauge in any situation is definitely nice to have. Psycho Blast got an interesting change, so the startup has been increased from 10 frames to 12 frames. Now, in and of itself, you know, it's not the biggest deal, but it's going to ruin a couple frame traps that he has, especially in conjunction with stuff like the Stand Light Kick nerfs. And overall, it's just different. So I don't think that it's really going to affect his combo ability, but, you know, it's a decent part of his game plan. You know, it's a very useful move to have, and the fact that it's a bit slower is going to change some things up. Now, this change here is the make or break between a real Bison player and a fraud Bison player, because EX Devil's Reverse now has 6 additional landing frames when the move hits. So if you hit very high up on a standing foe, the move is now potentially going to be negative on block versus universally plus on block. So if you're the kind of Bison who just spams EX Devil's Reverse and hopes for the best, this is really going to critically hurt your game plan. If you're a real Bison player and you don't rely on that crutch, well then, you know, it sucks, but if you use EX Devil's Reverse smartly, it's not going to be the end of the world. So, light and medium scissor kick both have been changed up a bit here. The light scissor kick has now quicker startup. So the startup used to be 13 frames, and now is 11 frames, and the push block has been changed. Or the pushback has been changed, rather. Now, it doesn't say if it's for the better or for the worst. I'm going to assume it's for the worst, because that's usually how it is. So, the frame changing, it has some interesting applications in that it might ruin some frame traps and it might create some new frame traps, so we'll have to see where that goes as the game progresses forward. And the medium one, it used to be 15 frame startup, and now it's 14 frame startup, so same deal. And our final change here is Heavy Psycho Inferno. So Psycho Inferno says here, now the foe will be float up higher when hit. So As it stands, it'll probably change the frame data when they hit the ground, thus changing potential Okazemi setups. It's hard to tell without any hard numbers, but they'll float up higher, meaning they'll land later, and so things will change from there. Now overall, Bison, I'd say, it's hard to say net buff or net nerf. I'd say net neutral. Stuff like the light kick being changed really sucks for Bison. But, you know, being more plus on hit for stand jab is really good. The stuff like the scissor kick changes, it could be a buff, could be a nerf, because there is some setups here where you cancel into the normal and then becomes like an auto frame trap. It's hard to tell without really playing. Bison also has a lot of hitbox, hurtbox changes, not saying what they are, just, you know, that they have been changed. So without actually playing the game or waiting for the English patch notes, it's hard to tell where exactly that's going to land. You know, please check the patch notes to see which ones are changed. But it's hard to tell until we actually get to play, you know, how it's going to plan out. But overall, I'd say net, he's roughly the same where he was before. So, necalli, let's start with the forward throw and back throw. So the forward throw has a 10 damage buff. So it does 110 now instead of 100. And if you're in trigger, it'll now do 120 instead of 110. And as for the back throw, it's going to be much the same with the forward throws in that it says circumstances after landing the back throw has been changed. So this is the same for back throw and forward throw. And the most I can take out of this is, you know, pushback's going to be increased. There's going to be no throw loops, you know, no dash forward after throwing the corner, get your throw loop in. That's going to be gone. That seems to be universal change across the board. So anyone who could throw loop, no longer going to have it. And necalli seems to be no exception. Any other characters? Standing light punch for necalli. Pushback on hit and block has been increased, meaning that potentially counter hit combos like this might be pushed out too far. We'll see, I guess. Hopefully not. I like those kind of combos, but we'll have to see for when the game launches just how much that pushback will be. Standing medium kick, the pushback on block has been increased, but not the pushback on hit. So if you're getting really belligerent with this, you know, it'll be pushed out a bit further out if they're blocking, but for the most part, the move's going to retain its usefulness. Now, on that note, let's go to crouching light punch. Just like standing light punch, pushback on hit and block both increased. Now, opening dagger, that's the overhead, down forward, and heavy punch. The pushback on block has been reduced, so that's a bit of give and take here. So the move is negative when blocked, so if the pushback's reduced, you know, that sucks because you're going to be closer to him, but the charge version in V-Trigger is plus on block, so the pushback means they're going to be much closer and probably in command grab range. So that's going to be very handy to have. So a bit of a plus, a bit of a negative on that one. Now that said, it did get a small side buff in that if it hits, you can cancel into your trigger now. So it'll help with your mid-screen zoning. You can activate right away, and potentially, depending on how close they are, you know, with the increased movement, you can really get in there. So small side buff, but and not that big of a nerf. Like, you'll still gain gauge fast with most characters, depending on how much the numbers change. But this one has been a long time in coming because he has basically the most useful V-skill in the game. Now, with that note in mind here, the target combo that uses the ground pound, same deal here, the V-gauge gain will be lessened. Now, necalli, he did get the universal command throw nerf in that they'll have 8 frames more recovery when you whiff. So that's the same across all versions, including EX, but you got some more buffs. So the regular versions across the board all do 10 more damage, so light goes from 130 to 140, medium goes from 140 to 150, and heavy goes from 150 to 160. And if you're in trigger, same deal, they get 10 more damage, so heavy would be 170 normally, goes to 180, so every version across the board, trigger or not, gets 10 more damage. And so in Season 2, he also got more damage across the board for his command grabs, so the command grabs generally are much more of a threat now. And finally, he will get a new move while on trigger. So his V-trigger 1 and 2, it's the same either way. It just which trigger you pick, you'll get the move appropriate to it. Now overall, I'd say, you know, he's basically where he was. So the V-trigger gain nerf sucks, but he does more damage again on his pile drivers, and you already got the damage buff in Season 2. So overall, he maintains his position of basically secret best character in the game. You know, he has no real weaknesses. He's got nothing but upsides. He still has basically the best trigger in the game. because, you know, faster, more damage, everything across the board. So he's very good, and he'll remain very good yet. Now, Vega has changed much like many characters here in that the forward throw, that the circumstances after landing a throw have been changed, meaning almost certainly that he's simply pushed back further, so in the corner he can't just abuse walk forward, throw over and over and over and over again. Now, next up here, as for his air throw, the damage has been buffed, so it used to do 130, now does 140. Handy to have, especially because he jumps up so high so fast in the air. So he can definitely catch people with air throws a bit better than most other characters who have an air throw can. Now, standing light punch, as with many characters here. This is both with claw and... Now, standing light punch without claw, just like many other characters here, the pushback on hit and block has been increased. Now, like always, I wonder, you know, say about counter hit combos, but for Vega, he can naturally combo from this into crouch medium punch without a counter hit. And any amount of push block, honestly, with this in mind, is a big nerf, because this is a 3-frame punish. And you see here, the range is actually, you know, fairly significant for a 3-framer. So he can do this into that and get 3-frame punches from further away than most characters, as long as the character was standing. So any amount of push block can really screw up him getting his crouch medium punch follow-up. So that's kind of a nerf, honestly. Standing heavy kick says can now hit opponents behind Vega. So if this is true, that means the hitbox would have to be massively extended out for it to be able to beat cross-ups if they're going to be behind Vega when he's doing it. If so, great. Because it's an anti-air option. It's a very slow anti-air option, but a potentially devastating one because it has a crush counter behind it, which he didn't follow up with the EX wall dive. But we'll have to see how it plays out in release, but potentially big for anti-air changes. Now, the move's still kind of slow for an anti-air, so it's still going to lose out a lot. But for potentially hitting people behind him, that's pretty big. Now, punch with claw, this guy right here, now has 3 active frames instead of 2. And also says, like, the stand heavy kick can hit people behind him. So an extra active frame is actually a fairly big deal. It's a really good move, especially after Season 2.5, when they buffed this move to be +3 on block from very negative on block. So this is now one of his better moves while in claw, and it seems to be all the better yet with an extra active frame. Now, his 2 target combos here, one is in claw, one's without claw. So first up here, Matador Flash, that's a heavy punch V-skill. Now it says here the second hit is now special cancelable. So you can go for this, into that, and go into like a ASC or something like that. Or into EX wall dive. And that's very decent, because the move has a very long hit confirm time. Like, you have a long time, like if you can listen to my button presses here. You have a long time to hit confirm if that actually connects or not. So that's pretty handy. And the third hit here, while not special cancelable, now it can be cancelled into V-trigger or into super. So overall, it helps with his use of it. Now, the hitbox was nerfed in Season 2, unfortunately. So it's back and forth, you know, shimmy potential was definitely lessened. But the fact that it's there, you know, helps his overall damage in claw. Because it's a bit iffy at times in claw versus barehanded, it definitely has higher combo potential. So the fact that you can do this and then do that and go into MPASC or wall dive or whatever ups his overall damage with that move. And once again, if you have trigger, then you can cancel the third hit into trigger or super and go from there. Now, much the same here. The target combo from Clawless. So the V skill part of the combo now will be able to cancel into trigger or super as well. And finally, just as a quick note too, both of these will have increased trigger gain when the third hit connects. The base V skill also can be comboed into super on hit now. It's going to be a rough hit confirm, you know, it's only one hit. And, you know, the hit stop's not that great, but, you know, it's better than nothing. Now, the triggers. So, Vega has 3 triggers, the standing, crouching, and airborne versions, and they all have been changed. So the standing and crouching versions, they both used to do 170, now it's only going to do 100. So it's a damage nerf. Now the idea here is, it says here the restriction of air combos following this move have been relaxed, which in plain English means that and EX wall dive now works. Now, it's a bit of a nebulous buff, so normally if you do like move and the trigger, see here we start at 80%, so now due to the general V trigger changes, we'd start at 70%. The wall dive hit upwards, is another 10% scaling, and then when we finally get to the air pile driver, yeah, we will be doing more overall damage, but it's more overall damage. That's not that much more overall damage at the cost of a bar, so I don't know, the buff's a bit iffy. And now the aerial version here, I'm assuming this is an incorrect thing in the patch notes. It says here damage has been increased by 10 from 170 to 180, but it does 200 damage, not 170. So unless it means they're nerfing it to 180, which would be very unfortunate. However, the stun's been increased from 150 to 200. And for all three of these versions here, you will gain special meter now, and so that's pretty handy. But overall, the standing and crouching versions, I'm a bit iffy. Yes, more overall damage, but more overall damage at the cost of a bar, and not that much more. And its use by itself, because you know you're never going to be close enough to hit without it outside of the corner, so it always has to be in the X wall dive. I don't know. My feelings are a bit mixed on it. Now, on the nerf front, first up, the Universal Command Throw nerf. Vega gets it, so, and not only does he get it, he gets it a bit worse than everyone else, because everyone else has 8 frames or more recovery on whiff of command grab, and Vega gets 10 frames recovery of whiff on command grab, because Vega always has to have nerfs bigger and better than everyone else. And on that front, so, the biggest buff he got after all the nerfs in Season 2 was the light kick roll. You were plus on block, or plus on hit rather, sorry, and you got a little mini mix-up afterwards. Either you can go for hit, or if you were in clawless form, you can go for light punch command grab, or you could do walk forward command throw, or walk forward regular throw, sorry. And then, you know, you can threaten that with a bit of a shimmy, and so on and so forth. So it gave him a little bit of mix-up potential after every hit light kick roll. So now, the pushback after the roll has been increased. Meaning, at least as far as the Capcom Cup build went, you can no longer reach stand light kick afterwards, which ruined basically almost all of its mix-up potential, because that's where all the threat was based off of. So if true, huge nerf to Vega. And now final change here, EX wall dive. It says here the timing of the move startup has been changed. Don't know if it's less or worse or better off, but knowing Capcom, probably worse off, unfortunately. The movement during the move has changed. That could mean a million other things. The one thing that EX had over the regular wall dive is your freedom of movement was much more complete. You could have much more control over yourself in the air, so it could be worse, could be better, we'll find out. And it says here the startup of the final stage of his attack has been changed. Now, honestly, I can't begin to think what that really means. Could mean it has faster startup, could mean it has slower startup, could mean the active frames start earlier or later, or it has a bigger or worse hitbox. It's really up in the air. But for better or for worse, the move's going to be different now, that's all I can really say. And now with all that said, so overall, I don't know, stuff like the easy hit confirms with this are alright, but it's not like Vega couldn't just, get combos off a stand heavy punch anyways. The command grab nerf sucks, but everyone's going to get it. The light kick roll nerf really sucks really bad. Overall, I think he's kind of the same position. It's really unfortunate. Like, Vega was my main in Season 1, and his Season 2 nerfs honestly made me quit playing Street Fighter V altogether. And I'm only slowly getting back into Street Fighter V because of people like Abigail, who was really fun to play. So, for my first main in Street Fighter V, the fact that I don't think he's really any better, considering he was, in the argument for worst character in the game after Season 2, the fact that these aren't just, huge buffs across the board really says a lot that they are mishandling the character, and that kind of sucks. Now on to Mika. So, like many characters here, her forward throw got a bit of a damage buff, did 130, now we'll do 140. And her crouching throw actually has been changed as well. So, she had a unique throw on a crouching foe here, a bit of a gonzo bomb. And so, first up here it says circumstances after landing throw have been changed, so almost certainly that means it's going to be a bit more pushback after the throw. Because if you did that in the corner, you're basically right beside them, and you can get a lot of setups after it, so that's probably going to go away. The damage has been increased, so it did 100 normally, now we'll do 120. And the stun has been up from 120 to 150, so it's going to be much better leading towards the stun. So Mika has 2 moves affected by the pushback changes on hit and block, and that's crouch medium kick and stand medium punch. So as with a bunch of the other characters, we'll see how it plays out, affecting combo structure and counter hit combos. Mika can naturally combo medium punch and the medium punch, So we'll see if that really messes up with her. The pushback is significant enough to push the character out of it. That'd be, decent chunk nerf. If so, hopefully not. But if it is the case, that'd be a bit of a nerf, but we'll have to wait and see how it turns out. Crouching medium punch, our dedicated anti-air button here, seems to have a bit of a buff. And it says here it can now hit people behind her, meaning it's able to stop cross-ups as well as the normal jump in. So if so, it was already a very good anti-air to begin with, and now will be all the better yet. Now her dive bomb did get a bit of a nerf, so the move has 3 additional frames of recovery when blocked. So, this was definitely your go-to tool when it comes to cross-up, fake cross-up, all that kind of stuff. So the move was already negative on block to be sure, but now all the more so. So people are going to get much bigger punches in if they get to block this move. Now, going from a nerf to a buff, her forward furious punch can now be special cancelled or V-skill cancelled. So after it hits, you could go, say, directly into her anti-air attack, or the flying butt slam, or just cancel directly into a V-skill and go from there. So the move was, it's one of her better moves already, to be sure, and the fact that special cancelable opens a whole new world of possibilities up. Now her V-skill says V-gauge increase if you keep it held down until the last stage. So if you hold it all the way through, not going to happen very often in a match, but if you do hold it all the way through, you'll get a big V-gauge buff. So overall, Mika's probably slightly better. She does have the special cancelable forward fierce punch now, which is potentially huge. We'll have to see how that plays out and which moves are allowed to combo either mid-screen or in the corner. The universal command grab nerf sucks, but everyone's getting it. And she does have slightly more damage on her better of the 2 command throws, so that's nice to have. The pushback, especially on stand medium punch, we'll have to wait and see if still lets it combo into itself. If not, that sucks, but we'll have to wait and see on that one because they don't go into detail exactly how far it's going to push back. But overall, I'd say slightly better. Now, as for Rashid, the first change we have here is his run. So it says here the distance Rashid has to move before starting or stopping his run has been slightly decreased. So meaning you get to that run state much quicker. Now, like many characters, Rashid does have his changes, some changes to his throws. So first up here is forward throw. It says first off, 2 frames of recovery have been added to a successful forward throw, meaning he'll recover 2 frames later. Now that said, the damage has been buffed. He'll do 10 more damage, so 130 instead of 120. And the stun has also been increased from 120 to 150. And all the stun changes that have had their stuns up, pretty big deal, because it gets you that much closer to the dizzy that you definitely want. Now the back throw, damage buff again, so it does 130, has been buffed to 140. Now, like many characters, Rashid also has a pushback change, so it'll be standing light kick that has pushback on hit and block increase. So for Rashid, it's important for some counter hit combos, so we'll have to see how that plays out. He might lose some counter hit combos, he might not. We'll have to see. If so, big nerf for Rashid, but once again, we're just going to have to wait and see how that one turns out because they do not give any indication how much that pushback is. Now, crouching fierce punch. Big crutch move for Rashid. People who play Rashid love it, people who play against Rashid hate it. So it has been slightly nerfed, maybe not as much as some people would like, and maybe not as much as some Rashid players have feared. But first up, it is 10 frames startup now versus 9. So it is 1 frame slower to start up now than it was before. And now the move is less plus on hit. So if it hit before, you were plus 7. And now it will be plus 6 frames on hit if it connects. Now he does have a small buff here on his crouching V-skill kick. So it is now going to gain more V-gauge every time it connects. So it's not going to be much more probably. They don't give specifics unfortunately, but any little bit of V-gauge helps. So the spinning mixers have been changed a little bit here. So normally spinning mixer, if you just mash it here, and if you know it's damage scaling, you see here it will scale. It uses up some of your damage scaling. So now it says here the move will not damage scale at all, past the first hit, but because of this, the damage has been changed overall. So the damage more likely will be the same. It'll remain like say 90 for your light punch spin, but it'll no longer up your damage scaling. So in a longer combo, it'll actually make you do more damage overall. Now that said here, medium spinning mixer says can now be cancelled into critical art after the second follow-up from matching the move. So I'm assuming, reading this correctly, I'm not a Rashid main, so unfortunately, but normally you can get about 2 hits in before you can cancel into your super, So I'm assuming you can get a little bit further up now in the air before you can cancel into your super and get a little bit more damage out of it. And the dashing spinning mixer has now been changed, so each of the follow-ups don't scale individually. So same deal as say your light punch mixer. The damage will be normalized, so you get more damage, roughly the same damage in the end, but it won't cause damage scaling as you keep it going. And our final change here is the tornado from V-Trigger will now gain you more meter upon hit. Doesn't specify how much more meter, but as always, more meter, more better, so nice to have. So overall, I say Rashid, he's still much in the same place he was before. He was a great character before, and he's going to be a great character now. He's got some tiny buffs, like, the V-Gauge buff here. The nerf, a lot of people thought this was going to be nerfed into the ground, It was a very slight nerf, and it's going to be, annoying for Rashid players. But the move still retains most of its usefulness here. You still get the first hit into, whatever. You can cancel it into your, EX, into roll, or whatever. All that's still going to exist. It'll just be 1 frame slower. And that's not the end of the world by any stretch. So overall, Rashid was strong, remains strong. So Karin, first up Karin here, as many other characters, says circumstances when landing the throw have been changed, meaning almost certainly that, her throw loop is gone. As far as I know, no throw loops are going to survive into Season 3 Arcade Edition, so same for Karin. Anyone who could throw you in the corner and remain beside you after the throw, that's going to go away. She's definitely going to be pushed back after a throw in the corner. Now, after that, significant change here is standing medium kick. That's definitely one of her dominant buttons here. And a bit change here, so the startup's been increased. So it used to be 7 frame startup, now will be 8 frame startup. So it is a smidge slower here. The recovery on whiff has also been increased, so it used to be 15 frames if you whiff the move, will now be 16. And this one definitely harder to swallow for some people here. The on block. So it used to be -2 on block, which is safe. Against like an Abigail, you didn't want to do it in his face, sure, but you were still safe on block. But now it is -4 on block, which means it's punishable on block if you do it close enough. If you space it at the range it's supposed to be used at, you're still going to be safe. It's not a big deal. But if you do it too close to the foe, anyone who has a 3 or 4 framer that's close enough can punish you for it. And with that in mind, the pushback on block has been reduced. So if you do it too close, they're going to be closer to you after that block, meaning it's going to be much easier for them to get that punish. Now, all in all, this move is still very good, don't get me wrong. But it definitely has taken a bit of a hit. And you definitely have to watch your spacing now, because if you're just going to be really belligerent with it, well, you're going to get blown up for it. Now, going from a bit of a bummer of a nerf from stand medium kick to something potentially really good, is standing heavy punch is now a crush counter OK move. So it does not state if it's going to be like a launch counter, a spin out counter, or a spin side counter. Now, going from a bit of a bummer from the standing medium kick nerf, a bit of a buff here. Stand heavy punch is now crush counter OK. So it does not state whether or not it's going to be a spin out or launch counter. If it's a spin out, that's pretty handy because you can dash forward to get a combo, much like off stand heavy kick. Or if it's a launch OK counter, we don't know yet, but any manner of crush counter added to the move is always a bonus. Now, back to a bit of a bummer here, and that stand heavy kick also got nerfed. So, it used to be 10 frame startup, and now has been increased to 12 frame startup. Now, the move, you could argue, is a bit silly. I think it was a bit silly, because it was a crush counter OK move on a very fast heavy normal that had a decent amount of range attached to it. But the fact that it's a bit slower, the move's still going to have its use, absolutely, but 2 extra frames before it actually connects will definitely give people more of a chance to fight back against Karin in the neutral. Now, like many other characters, Crouch Light Punch here has been changed with the pushback change, and that pushback on hit and on block has been changed. So this may affect counter hit combo, so something like this maybe won't work anymore. We'll have to find out when it goes live. A lot of characters who seemingly have that change, they all have counter hit combos off their jab, so we'll have to see how it works when it hits out. But another change to it is that it says here, opponent's floating state when hit by airborne moves has been changed. Now, Crouch Light Punch was very critical in getting the left-right 50-50 mix-up in the corner with a dash, command dash. So, I don't know if this kills that mix-up or makes it harder to do or maybe easier for the opponent to see which side you're going to land on. But it definitely will affect that mix-up. I can't see any other reason why that would be changed. Now, an interesting change here, crouch heavy punch says can now hit opponents behind Karin. So several other characters have a change like this where it says that. So maybe this is making this an anti-cross-up move. If so, huge change. Karin's always had a debatable history with anti-airs. Sometimes she really struggles with it. You know, she doesn't have much reliable in the way of anti-airs, you know, other than just burning bar. So the fact that if this is true and it hits cross-ups, beats cross-ups, pretty big change. And finally here, we have her trigger. Now, her first record and trigger here says that the V-gauge depletion from using this move has been increased. So it's going to take up more bar every time you do it. And also says here, the timing of the V-gauge depletion from using this move has changed. Now, I don't know if that means it uses it earlier in the move or later in the move. It's unsure, honestly, but the fact that it'll simply take up more bar is strictly a nerf, honestly. And overall, with that said, with all these changes in mind, Karin was definitely nerfed overall. Now, it's not crippling nerfs. And, you know, some stuff here, like stand heavy punch being crush counter is really nice. But overall, like, her two big footsie buttons are nerfed. The fact she uses more trigger for her Rekas is a nerf. Now, it's not debilitating like, say, some characters in Season 2 got. Like, you know, like, I say, a Chun-Li or something like that. But overall, she's definitely going to be weaker than what she was. Now, on to Laura. The first change we have here is standing light punch is affected by the pushback change. So it has increased pushback on hit and on block, meaning it may potentially mess with some of her counter hit combos. We'll have to wait and see. And now also the standing light punch is now less plus on block. It is now +1 on block where it used to be +2. So for people who struggled against some of her pressure, it's going to be a little bit easier to breathe against her. Now our next change up here, it says that standing medium punch, which is one of her better anti-air moves, can now hit opponents behind her, meaning, if I'm taking this correctly, that it is an anti-cross-up move as well as an anti-air move. Making this basically a dominant anti-air button overall. So if it can hit people who are trying to cross up, you know, as well as just regular anti-air, this is your go-to move for basically any foe that jumps. Crouching and light punch also affected by the pushback changes. So more pushback on hit and on block. And now here's the real big one here, standing medium kick. So if you play Laura, you love it. If you play against Laura, you absolutely hate this move. So the numbers are on hit and block and all that are going to be the same. But the startup has been changed. So this move is now a 7-frame startup instead of a 5-frame startup. So it is a bit slower to start up. So it means you can be, or rather you can't be as belligerent with it and just go berserk on it in the opponent's face anymore. As for her V skill, the overhead, it's a bit of a buff, bit of a nerf. So the nerf is it now does 10 less damage. It used to do 80 damage. It will now do 70 damage. However, you will get more V-gauge bar for having it connect. Now, if you are already in trigger, the move has been changed, so it does 100, will do 90 damage now. And this is specifically only for the V trigger version. The move is now +4 on hit instead of +3. So it will naturally combo into, say, a jab or any 4-frame move. It is now -6 on block instead of -7. Depending on the character you're fighting, that's, you know, could be not a big deal at all, or could be the biggest deal in the world. Especially when you space it, but, you know, the fact that it's negative on block in the V skill or V trigger version is always nice. And also 1-frame recovery, doesn't matter if it hits or whiffs or whatever, but 1-frame recovery on the trigger version has been eliminated, so it recovers 1 frame quicker. Now onto the V trigger itself. The V trigger is now going to be a 3-bar trigger instead of a 2-bar trigger. So that's a pretty big change. However, to compensate for this, the length of the V trigger has been increased, so it'll last much longer overall. So it'll take a bit more to get to it, but once you get to it, it's going to last longer. And, you know, the longer it's up, the more people are going to be in the Laura blender. So, yeah, give and take with it, but overall, it's still going to be quite strong. Now, on to her pile drivers. There's the universal nerf. No pile driver, no matter what, as the regular version or it could be the EX version, there is 8 frames of recovery added to it. So once again, universal change, and Laura is affected the same as everyone else. And finally, let's talk about Thunderclap per projectile. So in your normal state, the Thunderclap can now be V trigger cancelled. So you could do, like, say, Akuma, do your clap and go immediately in the trigger. If you are in trigger, then the Thunderclap can be V skill cancelled, so you can dodge in and out or whatever, go for the overhead. And the EX clap can also be V skill cancelled if you're in V trigger. And it says here it has 20 active frames added to this move. So as far as I can tell, it means it's going to last 20 frames longer. So now instead of going most of the screen, it's basically going to go all the screen. And if so, that's huge. You know, this is already, depending on what side if you're playing her or playing against her, one of the best moves or one of the most frustrating moves in the game. And it having any more duration is really big and big feather in her cap. Now that said, a lot of people, you know, if you thought Laura was going to be nerfed into the ground, well, here we are, you know, she's not. I'd say she's roughly the same power level, if not maybe even a little bit stronger with stuff like the clap changes and their extra movement and trigger. The fact that the stand medium kick was nerfed to be slower, sure, is very abusable, but that was not the only good thing she had by any stretch. She has plenty more reliable things than just this. So overall, I'd say she's roughly about the same, if not maybe even a smidge better. On dhalsim, like many characters here, forward throw, no damage buff, but it says here, circumstances when this throw is successfully landed have changed, meaning almost certainly, probably affecting pushback in the corner, because he's right on top of you when he gets it in the corner. So like many other characters, get rid of throw loops, get rid of corner throw pressure, you gotta be a little further back, and you know, that's how it is for most characters seemingly, that have throws that keep you right in front of them in the corner, so it's gonna be much the same for dhalsim. Now, as for the pushback stuff, dhalsim's standing light punch and standing light kick both have increased pushback on hit and block. You know, once again, meaning, you know, can potentially mess with some counter hit setups. We'll have to see, but the pushback will be increased on hit and on block for these moves. Crouching medium punch and back heavy punch both have been changed to say that they can now hit opponents behind dhalsim, probably to help with jump ins and cross ups. So these are both very good anti-air moves, but they hit a very, you know, strict definition of airspace. So anything to help dhalsim keep people off them is going to be good. With these changes, with many, seems to help discourage, you know, jump in happy play. So dhalsim, with his multitude of options, is going to definitely benefit from this. Now, in a very interesting change here, it says that jumping medium punch can be cancelled into V skill on hit. So if you manage to get this as a hit, and it cannot hit standing foes no matter what you do. So if you try to hit someone who's standing with this, it's not going to work out. No matter what you can do, won't hit standing people. But if you hit someone air to air with this, you can now just cancel into your float and go from there. And that's kind of handy, you know. I don't think this is going to be a deal breaker, but it definitely helps his air control, as he can smack you out of the air with the punch, and then he's immediately floating and controlling the airspace above the opponent. Now, his super here says that the airborne juggle points have been relaxed, meaning that this move will now be able to juggle into things it could not juggle into normally. So if you manage to get the foe airborne, say especially in the corner, you can definitely go for super afterwards and it will connect. And our final change here is the yoga burner, that's his trigger. So as it stands here, it reads that the damage has been increased, and that's the hit, not so much the DOT, but the damage has been increased. Normally does 100, it'll now do 120. And the meter gain has been, if it hits, has been increased. So overall, dhalsim, nothing but buffs. The pushback changes, we'll have to see across the board how this works out. But overall, you know, it's going to be easier to have him stop jumping foes with the anvil and crouch medium punch changes. The fact that, you know, trigger does more damage is always helpful. It's not a lot of buffs, but it's certainly enough. He was already decent, and it's going to help him stay even more decent yet. Now, on to Fang, everyone's favorite low-tier hero. First up here, we have a change here. It says that his standing medium kick can now hit opponents behind him. Now, this is very odd, because I know there's a lot of characters that have this seemingly to stop cross-ups, but nothing about this move says it can hit someone behind him, just going by the animation. But if true, you know, can't argue it. It's very handy to have. The animation doesn't agree with it, but being able to hit foes behind them, maybe stopping a cross-up or something like that, pretty handy. Now, next up, the crouching medium kick. So this has always been one of its better moves. It's very plus on block. So now, it also says, can hit foes behind him. So, depending on the angle, this was always okay as an anti-air. Now, his foot actually does start behind him when he starts the kick. So this one, at least animation-wise, is more believable. And also be good to stop cross-ups. Now, this is the single most significant change that Fang has, and that's his V-skill. You know, as it always stands, like if it hits, it's poison, and technically it's unblockable because it doesn't have a hit or hurtbox. But now, if you are in your trigger, it will have a hitbox. So, if you're in trigger, this move now is an honest-to-God projectile. So this move can hit, and then it makes his zoning while he's in trigger, actually, something to be scared of. So normally he hits trigger and it's kind of whatever. But now the fact that this is an honest to God fireball, along with the usual stuff, makes this trigger something to be feared. And on top of the hitbox stuff on trigger, the move in general now just builds you more V gauge. The damage for all of his sotojas, that's the lunging punch move here, have all been increased across the board. So the light punch does normally 60, will now do 70. Medium does 70, will now do 80. And the heavy punch does 80, will now do to 100. So it always inflicts poison no matter what. But now, especially the heavy punch version, 20 more damage will actually, it'll definitely up his damage output in combos quite a bit. Because, combo damage is not one of his strengths. And that's usually the combo ender for a lot of his stuff. So having 20 more damage on the heavy, nice buff to have. And our final change here, heavy Roibenda, that's the gas trap, now has 3 additional frames of recovery. So that's only heavy, it's not light or medium, just the heavy version. Now when it's all said and done, this is definitely net gain for Fang. The damage buff, especially on the heavy punch stab, is very sweet to have. The fact that his V-skill becomes an honest-to-God projectile when he's in trigger, definitely very neat. He becomes a decent, incredible zoning threat because, it's very nice and slow. And, the whole reason, people normally don't care because all it does is apply the poison, and unfortunately, poison damage has not been changed. But the fact that it's a proper fireball along with all the other stuff, and you can, slide in and out, try to trick you up while it's coming in at you, and it has a proper hitbox, it might be very real. So overall, definitely Fang's buffed, and depending on how big that hitbox is, he's potentially very threatening now while in trigger. On to Alex. Our first change here is that standing medium punch pushback on hit has been reduced, not enhanced. Not further away like a lot of other characters. Has been reduced. So after you do stand medium punch and it connects, not if it's blocked, but if it connects, they'll be closer to you than it currently stands. As it stands now, that's actually a pretty big buff. Alex definitely wants people closer to them, especially on hit, because you can threaten, a heavier version of a pile driver, and from there, just make all your buttons just a lot more scary. So the closer they are to you, the better. Next up, crouching heavy punch says here, the opponent is set flying slightly further away from the second hit of this move, meaning they're going to land further away than they normally do. Now, I don't know if this only applies to if only the second hit connects, because if you use this as an anti-air, a lot of times only the second hit is going to connect, or say off certain combos. But as it stands here, it just says they will be further away landing. They don't specify how much further away, but looks like it's going to be slightly harder to hit stuff afterwards. Now, chop. This is definitely a nerf here. So all chop versions, doesn't matter light, medium, or heavy. The move is now, instead of -4, which is technically, not safe on block, but usually very safe spaced correctly, is now -6 on block, and the pushback on block has been decreased. It would seem that they don't want you to use this move willy-nilly, because now if it is blocked, you're generally going to at least get some form of a punish now. Because before, you could space it pretty safely that the opponent can not really do anything about it, and now that's not going to be the case. You're going to get your punish now, for sure. Now, when it comes to Lariat, that's Forward Fierce Punch. This is a defining Alex move, and it got a big buff. So, first up here, it is now +7 on hit instead of +6. So, you have one more active frame, meaning it would naturally combo into, say, a crouch medium kick if you so wanted to, which could be handy if it hit further away. Because normally if it hits far away, you kind of have no recourse because nothing else is going to hit, so at least you can get a crouch medium kick. And also, the active frames have been increased from 4 to 4 rather, from 3. So, meaning it's just that much easier to use it, say, on someone's wake up to hit them, that much easier to use as an anti-air. All in all, this is just a tremendous big buff to the move. More active frames, the fact that, if they happen to be a little further away, you can still get a combo with crouch medium kick. All in all, it's one of his best moves, and it just got strictly better. Now, for the command grabs, across the board, just like everyone else in the game, there'll be more recovery on whiff. So for Alex, it's 9 frames instead of 8, but still more recovery on whiff, so you got to really watch out just tossing these out willy-nilly. Now, across the board, every version does 10 more damage. So light does 160, will now do 170, medium does 170, will now do 180, Heavy does 180, will now do 190, and the EX does 220, will now do 230. Now, one nerf here for the light punch, but a buff for the rest, and for the regular versions anyways. So light punch power bomb did 220 stun, it will now do 200, which is a nerf. However, medium and heavy will now both do more stun. So it does 220 for medium, will now do 230, and for heavy power bomb does 220, like across the board they all do 220, will now do 250 stun. For knee smash and the EX version, it says here it's been adjusted so the charge direction does not change mid-move, meaning you can do a slash elbow afterwards. So it just means basically the Okizemi's are kind of built in, I suppose. So they'll always be at a fixed distance versus a variable one. Now, specifically for the medium and heavy versions of the move, 2 active frames have been added, meaning it's going to be that much more active, meaning it's a little easier to hit a foe in the air. And also, the distance Alex travels has been changed. Doesn't far, could be further, could be less far. It does not specifically tell us, which one it is, unfortunately. And also, for the medium and heavy versions, there will be 5 added frames of recovery while landing. So he'll take just 5 frames longer to get to his neutral state after he lands after the medium and heavy versions. Overall, definitely a net buff for Alex. It's not game-changingly good. He's still, roughly going to be where he is on the tier list, I think. But the fact that, especially Larrett, which, is pound for pound his best move anyways, is better. The pile drivers, it really incentivizes to use the heavier pile drivers with more stun attached to them and more damage. And it looks like that heavy and medium versions of the knee will be slightly better anti-airs with the fact that they have more active frames attached to them. Overall, he's just in a better position than he was before. On to Guile, his first change here. The back throw, it's one of the situations where it says circumstances after landing this have been changed, meaning he's probably going to be further back than he was before. Because as it stands, Guile, he was definitely in place to be right in front of your face when you waked up. So that's probably going to be changed where you're going to be separated a bit further apart, so he can't just immediately pressure you after the back throw. Next up, the knee bazooka move. That's forward or backwards like kick. Now has more recovery on whiff or in general, actually. So this does not affect if the move hits or is blocked, but overall, the move recovery is now 20 frames instead of 16. So it's 4 frames longer overall. So if you're just using this to move around in neutral while using it to maintain your charge, beware that the move now has 4 more frames of recovery. So you're going to be out there unable to block just a smidge longer. Spin back knuckle, that's forward fierce punch right here. Now it takes 11 frames to start up instead of 10 frames. So the move will be 1 frame slower before it hits its first active frame and is able to hit. Rolling Sobat, that's the classic forward or backwards medium kick move. It says the distance Guile moves forward with this move has been slightly increased, which means this move is already one of the better footsie buttons he had to begin with, and now he can do it from further out. So that's, even if it's just a tiny amount further ahead, that's still a substantive buff. That, one of his best footsie moves is just now better. And our final change here is Guile high kick, that's now forward fierce kick here. It says it can now hit opponents behind him, meaning like some other characters now, this move has some apparent anti-cross-up value. Overall, I gotta say, Guile's basically in the same place. The back throw nerf, if it is what I think it is and he can't pressure people after the back throw anymore, that sucks. But the fact that his best footsie's move, at least for range, has more range, kind of makes up for it, at least in some degree. Overall, Guile was already one of the best characters in the game, and he's going to, for the most part, just remain where he is. It's a net overall neutral buff here. 1 big nerf, 1 big buff. And he's mostly going to stay in the same place he already was, at least tier-wise. Now, Ibuki, one of the big changes here is she actually had her health value changed. So she normally had 950 health, and now she has 925. So it's not quite like old Akuma or nothing yet, but the fact, 925, it's really low health. So, you really got to watch out and not get hit anymore. So, standing light punch, that got a bit of a nerf here. So, it is now +2 on hit instead of +3. It is now +1 on block instead of +2, and you can no longer chain cancel it, which meaning it cancels into itself. So overall, it's a pretty big nerf to stand light punch. And, Ibuki will definitely feel this one as one of her more handy jabs. Now, going from a nerf to a buff, standing heavy kick is now +3 on hit instead of +1, meaning that you can combo directly into standing jab, which you cannot do before. So that definitely opens up new combo routes and new combo opportunities, because before standing heavy kick, that was kind of it, and now you can go right into a jab and, plenty of possibilities from there. Crouching medium punch got a recovery nerf, so this move currently has 12 frames of recovery on whiff. It'll now have 16 frames of recovery. So if you're the kind of ibuki who just, belligerently tosses this out while trying to cancel into like EX kunai or something, watch out, because it's a bit more punishable now if you whiff it. Crouching medium kick got a very interesting change, and the move is actually now plus on hit. So it used to be neutral on hit, so +0. It is now +3 on hit. And also, the move is now safe on block. So if you did this point blank before, it was -3, meaning, a good portion of the cast could punish it. It is now -2 on block, so no matter what, this move is safe on block. So overall, it's a good poking tool, and it'll remain as such, because now, being plus frames after a poke means you'll be a little more aggressive. Her back medium punch command normal has been changed in that the second hit of the move is no longer special cancelable. So before you can get 2 hits in and special cancel, no longer. Now the first hit is still special cancelable, that is unchanged, so you can still do whatever afterwards, but now you cannot get both hits in and still get your special cancel. So this next change can kind of change the fundamental way she plays and what her fundamental game plan is. So her aerial light punch medium kick target combo now says the distance opponents are sent after being hit by this has been changed. Now the way I'm taking this is the usual left-right mix-up you get after that is probably going to be dead, because if it moves them any further away, you're not going to be able to get the left-right mix-up. So if true, it's a big fundamental change to the way she plays. Because, if you play ibuki, it's probably a big part of your game. If you play against ibuki, it's probably one of the more frustrating things you got to deal with. The fact that she gets a left-right mix-up after she already gets the full combo. So yeah, if it's the way it's read, if you're any further out, you're just not going to be able to get that 50-50 anymore. Now, another interesting buff here is that her down medium punch forward fierce kick target combo here, instead of being neutral on hit, is now actually +2 on hit. So if this manages to connect, still your turn. That's a pretty big deal. EX kunai now has 4 frames of recovery added to the move. Now this move was like +16 or +18 on block or something ridiculous like that, like a Mortal Kombat style move. So it just means it's less ridiculously plus on block, and it might change some follow-ups here. It also says the opponents are now sent flying further away from the explosion part of this attack. Meaning on top of the target combo aerial thing, really looks like they want to get rid of the 50-50 after the EX kunai. Her V skill has reduced gain on your V gauge on hit now. So kind of like necalli, this was one of the more abusable V skills in neutral. So since necalli's gotten reduced, much the same here, so hers is going to get reduced. The move itself is still a great poke, still going to be very useful, it's just not going to get you quite as much gauge as it used to. Now speaking of gauge, let's go right into the V trigger. So it says here first up, the stun value from the bombs has been reduced. It used to do 100 stun, now it has been reduced to 80 stun. And it says here combo properties after landing this move has been changed. It doesn't say change to what, but it might be reduced juggle potential, we'll have to see, but I'm not going to assume it's not going to be changed for the better. The meter gain, however, has been increased from hitting the move. And our final change here is the kunai hold and release, where she dumps all of her kunais. After you hold the button here, it is now special cancelable. So after it, you can cancel right into a special move, like say a DP or whatever you would like. I'd say net neutral buffs for ibuki. The buffs and nerfs is depending on your playstyle. So if you're a scumbag mix-up ibuki, definitely nerf to your playstyle, and you probably will drop the character. However, if you are a more honest ibuki and you like playing, proper Street Fighter, and yeah, I guess my bias is showing here, this is definitely a buff to your playstyle. So if you like a little more straightforward playstyle, it's definitely a buff. If you like relying more on coin flips, definitely a nerf. Moving on to Balrog. First up, his forward throw does have a damage increase. So it does 110 currently, has been buffed to 130 damage. Also, the stun it does 120, also been buffed to 150 stun. So for damage and stun, big buffs for sure. And it's Also, pray to the circumstances after landing the throw have been changed, meaning almost certainly, you know, he's able to really pressure you after throwing you in the corner, so it'll probably be pushed back further than he currently does. His standing medium punch, which is a good anti-air button, also has been changed with the caveat of can now hit opponents behind balrog, meaning that this move has gained some value as an anti-cross-up move, or at least as it's written it should. Now, standing heavy punch next up says now has 12 frames startup instead of 11 frames. So this move is simply 1 frame slower to start up. So maintains its value as a pretty good poke, so overall you're still going to be using it the way you always used it, just going to be 1 frame slower. Heavy kick has now been changed on the crush counter end of things. So it states here that now sends the opponent flying further away when landing the crush counter, so meaning you basically, as far as I'm intending anyways, you definitely got to dash forward to get your follow-up after the crush counter, and no more walking forward, so you know, maybe something more like this into whatever, versus like you could walk forward and get a second hit in. They probably don't want that to happen anymore. And now also the outside of the crush counterpart has 22 frames of recovery now instead of 19. So if you whiff the move, it is now 3 frames slower to recover. Jumping heavy kick, one of its better jumping moves here, has been changed so it has 9 frames to start up instead of 8 frames. So the move, when you jump in, will come out 1 frame slower. Now the stomping combo, that's crouch medium medium here. It says it is now -7 on block instead of -6. So for some characters who have slower moves here, it's going to be easier to get decent punish on you. And the recovery when doing V-trigger canceling has been changed. Now, it's almost certainly changed for the worse, because, you know, he's like +1 or +2, I think, after he does V-trigger cancel afterwards. So, it's basically a blow to scumbag balrog style play, where he just goes for it, bulldogging your trigger, and if it hits, you know, kill the opponent, and if not, well, it's still your turn. So, that's probably going away. So, turnaround punch. I don't think anyone watching this video, or anyone period who ever played Street Fighter V, expects this move to not get nerfed, and it got nerfed. So, now across the board, if the move is blocked, it is now -2. Doesn't matter if it's level 1, doesn't matter if it's level 10, it is -2 on block. For someone like me, I have a bit hearing impairment. I can never for the life of me hear what number he said. I know some people could, for me, no dice. I could never understand what he was saying. So now I don't have to know if he said 1 or if he said 10 or whatever. I know now it's always my turn after I block it, versus he could be -2, or say if he had a higher charge one, he could be like +6 or 7, right? So I can never know if it was my turn to hit a button, and now I don't need to. You know, he's -2. Now, that said, there are some other changes here. So, level 1 through level 7, or sorry, level 6, so 1 through 6, is no longer throw invincible startup. So level 7 and above does have throw invincible startup, but 1 through 6, no more. And also, starting with level 4, the damage values have been nerfed. Now, level 4 did 160 damage normally, going down to 140. Now, if we go all the way to level 10, used to do 500 damage at level 10, and now it does 350. Now, still a lot, but you know, the damage starting at the higher charge levels are nerfed across the board. Now, one thing here to quickly note here is level 1 is a small buff here. It's actually more plus on hit. So a level 1 charge used to be +1, it's now +2. So if you get a counter hit, you can get a decent little jab follow combo. Normally you could get like something like that on a counter hit combo, but the stand jab, you know, range isn't the best. So level 2, if you get a counter hit, you do this into jab into straight or something, depending on how close you are. So that's something. So it's not all doom and gloom, but for the most part, this move is completely nerfed. And finally for Balrog, going to the V-skill attacks. So V-skill punch and V-skill kick both give you less V gauge on hit. However, the target combos now give you V gauge because they never gave you any before. So net positive, net negative, I'm not sure, but overall, you know, it's definitely a change. So overall, you look at Balrog, there's no two ways about it. He's definitely nerfed overall. So stuff like, you know, stomp combo into V trigger was very easy. It was very belligerent. Everyone did it. You still can do it, and you know, if you hit, it's still gonna work. However, on block, it's not gonna be as brain dead. Tap combos, you know, just tap in general is a very abusive move. I was never a fan personally. This is bias coming into it. So the move is definitely, nerfed throughout. It still is useful, but it is not as brain dead as it used to be. And I apologize for using the term brain dead. I know some people who play balrog, you're going to be really bummed out by that. But this move had too many positives and not enough negatives, so it's getting nerfed accordingly. On to Juri. The Juri community, definitely one of the more vocal ones, and I think they'll be fairly happy with what happened here. So let's talk with some of the stuff here. First up here, standing medium kick has an increased cancel window. So you can't cancel the second hit, you never could. But the first hit's usually what you need to do to get into combos. And compared to the rest of the game, like even me, I'm having a bit of trouble with it right now because I don't normally play Juri. But you had way less time to cancel on the special moves compared to like anyone else in the game. So since the cancel windows increased, I'm going to assume it's more in line with everyone else. Oh man, I really don't play Juri, as you can tell here. So it's hopefully going to be more in line with everyone else in the game, so you don't have to really freak out and rush just to get your special cancels in. Now another really good quality of life buff here is her target combo of stand medium punch into forward fierce punch. This guy right here can hit crouching foes. So as it currently stands, this move completely whiffs on crouchers. So now it will hit on crouchers, meaning any combos you would use with this, you don't have to worry if they're crouching, if they're standing. It'll be universally useful. It'll always connect. Her V skill says it now gives less, not more, less V gauge when it hits. Kind of nonsensical to me. Hopefully it's not that much less, it's not a very abusable move by any stretch. But it is what it is, so that is a nerf to the V skill. Now, for her Fujihan moves, first up here, it says the light kick version, the follow-up window has been increased. Now, I'm not sure what it means by the follow-up window, other than maybe it recovers a bit quicker. I'm sorry, I'm not a Juri main, so for this, that one's a bit beyond me. However, moving onwards to the medium kick one, this one's a lot more easy to understand. Simply put, damage got buffed. So, does 60 currently will be increased to 70. And if you are in trigger, the stun has gone from 80 to 100. And as for the heavy kick version, the damage for both the regular and V trigger versions normally does 80, has both been increased to 100, so just more damage across the board. Her EX Dragon Punch got a nice little buff here, so it is now full invincible from frame 1 until frame 12. So currently as it stands, it was only invincible till frame 8, so depending on, say, if you're trying to stop a jump or something, if you're too early on the gun, you actually could have run out of invincibility frames before you even connected with the move and can get a hit out or trade. So it has 4 more frames of invincibility, and that's very handy to have for her DP move. The real big one here, her V trigger. So V trigger, first up, is now a 2-bar move. So as a 3-bar move, I think everyone would agree it's quite weak as a 3-bar move. But as a 2-bar move, it's going to be quite a bit more useful. So there is a little bit of a caveat with it now. So every time you do a move in trigger, it's going to take up more bar than it normally does. However, the overall active time while you're waiting for it to deplete has also been extended, so it's been increased. So it'll be less drain overall while you're just sitting around not doing your moves. But overall, definitely a big buff. Having it be a 2-bar trigger instead of a 3-bar trigger, huge for Juri. It's going to really increase its potential as an offensive tool, and overall just really big. So Juri buffs overall, it's big, his buffs. Big quality of life when it comes to stuff like a cancel window for the stand medium kick, and for the target combo to hit on crouchers too. And stuff like the EX Dragon Punch being more invincible, that's great. And the trigger being 2 bars instead of 3, it's terrific. So overall, definitely big buffs for Juri. Moving on to Urien, it says here for his forward and back throw, the situation after landing the throw is changed. That's a bit different language than some of the other people where you're probably move further backward after a throw. But in this case, I gotta assume it's much the same here. If you do throw in the corner, he's still basically directly on top of you. So he'll probably move backwards, and much the same if he does the back throw. Next up for changes, we have standing light punch. Is now +4 instead of +5 on hit. So it's 1 less frame you're plus on hit. So that means it'll no longer natural combo into something like a stand light kick. So that's unfortunate, but it's not too big of a deal. So, standing heavy punch, he had a nerf. It says here, his advantageous frames after landing this move, his crush counter have been greatly reduced. So, that basically means, you know, goodbye to like this kind of stuff. Not going to work no more. Now, it doesn't say how much it's been reduced by, but you're probably going to have to settle for dash into stand medium and the crouch medium or something like that. You know, it's still not too bad, but it's an overall reduction of damage. Crouching light punch, much like standing light punch, is now +4 on hit instead of +5, so no more being able to combo into standing light kick. Jumping medium punch now has 1 extra active frame. Due to the bit of his odd jump angle here, this was always meant to be used like, you know, say like Ryu's, and you hit in the air and you get a juggle follow-up afterwards. Not many people ever really used it like that, but having 1 active frame more can definitely help in that matter. Jumping heavy punch is 1 frame slower startup now, so it used to be 8 frames startup and now it has 9 frames startup. Quarrel punch, that's forward medium punch here, has 2 frames of recovery added to the move. So the move will take 2 frames longer to get back to the neutral position after you whiff it. So if you're the kind of person like me who uses this move to hit people on their wake up because it has so many active frames that you don't really need a setup, you can just kind of eyeball their wake up and do it and the active frames will hit them. If you do whiff it now, it'll be basically 2 more frames for them to do something to punish your whiff. And our final change here, Aegis Reflector. Are you thinking nerfs? No, you'd be thinking wrong. It's buffs. So Aegis Reflector now gives you more meter when the move hits. And that's kind of it for Urien. So I guess very, very slight nerfs overall. You know, the crush counter one, you know, you're going to be losing probably like 30 to 40 damage on your crush counter combos. But overall, everything that makes Urien really good, it's all still there. If everything you like about his playstyle is still going to work, everything you like about his offense, his defensive options, everything about Urien is basically untouched. Just a couple slight nerfs. But other than that, he's still incredibly strong. Moving on towards Akuma. First up, we have forward throw changes. So we're hit with the old circumstances after landing thing. So goodbye corner pressure basically after landing the throw in the corner. Because, you know, he can just kind of dash in and just keep looping you forever. So that's not going to work anymore. However, now to make up for that, so damage has been buffed. It does 110 currently, will be up to 130 damage. And the stun has got a massive buff here. So it currently does 120 stun, will be up to 170 stun. So big buff for Akuma when it comes to stun damage from the throw. That makes you know, fishing for a throw after near stun really good. Next up for crouching heavy punch, it now says it can hit opponents behind Akuma. So as with always, this is seemingly an anti-cross-up change, but you know, visually the move doesn't say anything about, you know, hitting foes behind them, but that's what it says, so we gotta go by it. Jumping medium punch has been changed a fair bit. So first up here, it used to be 5 frame startup, it'll now be 7 frame startup, so the move will be slower. And the damage has been changed, so it currently does 60, it will change to 50. Now, however, on the positive side here, the move is now special cancelable. So you could do something like hit the move and go directly into air tatsu. And also the move juggles when hitting opponents, allowing stuff like the tatsu follow-up to work. And potentially, maybe like Ryu's jumping medium punch, you could hit it, land, and get a Shoryu when they're landing, or something like that. Forward fierce punch has been changed up here. So first up here, it's 1 frame slower startup. So it takes, used to take 31 frames before the first active frame. It'll now take 32 frames for the first active frame. It is now +5 on hit instead of +4. However, on the flip, the move is now -2 on block instead of being +1 on block. So you could go and do something like, say, forward fierce punch into stand medium kick, and it's a natural combo, and go from there. So that's a big buff. But no longer is it still your turn if it gets blocked. Now, next up here for his super move, it says combo capabilities after landing this move has been adjusted. It does not suggest in what ways it has been adjusted, but certain combos in the corner you could juggle after it hits, and I'm going to assume it cannot juggle anymore after the move connects. If true, you know, it's a bit of a nerf, unless they go the other way with it, and you can just juggle anything afterwards, who knows. But I'm assuming, you know, since it's so useful as very comboable super, that bit of a juggle you get in the corner after it hits is going to go away. Now, the next change here affects the medium kick Tatsu, and it's actually quite similar to Ken. So if the first hit does not connect, the follow-ups will do more damage here. So you see here, the last hit does a pitiful 20 damage. So that's going to be up to 40, and depending on where the other hits land, after the first hit, it's just going to be doing more damage overall. EX Shoryuken here, it says if hitting an airborne opponent, so when you're juggling with it, they can now flip out. So this is probably to reduce the fact, if they land, you can get some sort of Oki on them. So if they flip out, they'll land on their feet, so they'll be standing in front of you, meaning you won't be able to get Oki after the hit. His V-skill Punch will now give you less V-gauge upon hit. It doesn't state how much less, but it's a bit of a nerf, but very rarely is this move used outside of specific situations, so it's not too big of a deal, but it is still a nerf. And now going from the V-gauge to V-trigger directly, so normally here, Shoryuken in trigger does 200 damage flat. It's been nerfed to 180 damage. It is, definitely a nerf, but you still keep the hard knockdown and all that, so it's still pretty good in that respect anyways. And now if you are in trigger, your Go Hadoken, your basic fireball, will use less gauge per fireball. So as it stands, you basically get 4 uses if you use them all right away and don't wait around. You may potentially get 5 depending on how much gauge is saved per fireball. But now speaking of savings, let's go into more extravagance. Zanku Hadoken, that's the air fireballs here, they'll now consume more V-gauge when used. So you can get like 5 of these suckers out, and you'll probably have to get 4 from now on. Definitely, one of the main uses of trigger is the incredibly strong air fireballs, so you simply cannot get as many as you used to now. Overall, Akuma, I'd say slight nerf. He's still incredibly powerful. I know the Fort Fierce Punch change will be divisive because, if it's blocked, it's not your turn. But if it hits, now you can get stand medium kick afterwards. The combo damage goes up dramatically. So, give or take on that one. Some people would like the safety being plus, but some people might like the more damage. But overall, I'd say slight nerf, but still an incredibly powerful character and probably still top 5. Moving on to Kolin. First up, we have Standing Heavy Punch here. The damage has unfortunately been reduced, so currently does 90, will now do 80 damage. And it says here, its behavior when landed as a crush counter has been changed. It does not specifically say what, but currently it's a spin out crush counter, so it might be changed to a launch crush counter, I don't know. But I don't know, I'd probably expect the worst, honestly, because that's always how it works in Capcom games. So it probably will be a launching crush counter where you can't really get a follow-up anymore. Standing Heavy Kick has been given the property says now can hit opponents behind Kolin, so perhaps an anti-cross-up measure. Now thinking about this move's animation says it can hit people behind her, but as it says, so we gotta go by it, so it can hit opponents behind her now. Now, Crouching Light Kick, it says specifically here, when done from a medium vanity step, that the pushback on hit and block has been increased, and this is also true for when the move is changed. And the timing from using it from medium vanity step has changed. So, in and of itself, might not mean much, but it may affect certain setups she has. So have to watch out for that, and the pushback change seems to want to break setups for the most part, so you could probably take this one as a nerf. Jumping Heavy Kick has a nerf as well. So it says here, the one active frame at the end of the move has been removed. So the move, if you ever played against Kolin, this is one of the hardest moves in the game to anti-air properly, because the move is very active and it kind of hits up that whole arc of the move as she kicks. So it'll be maybe slightly easier to anti-air it, but it is a nerf for people playing Kolin, unfortunately. Sniping Kick, that's back heavy kick here. The move has had its startup reduced to 14 frames from 15 frames, so this move is 1 frame faster than it used to be. However, the recovery has also been reduced, so it used to be if this move whiffed or whatever, it'd be 21 frames of recovery, so it's been changed to 19 frames of recovery. So unless there's a setup I'm unaware of, this is a straight buff to the move. Next up, we have a change here for Cold Low. That's one of the target combos. It says the second hit is now V-trigger cancelable. So I'm assuming it's the second hit of the sweep and not the second hit overall, because the second hit overall already is V-trigger cancelable, so I'm assuming at the end of the sweep portion of it, you can now cancel into your V-trigger. Next, command normals have been changed as well. So Brenical, that's after M Vandy step, and you do crouching light punch in, or light kick into heavy punch. That has now been changed. It is now -2 instead of -8 on block. So it's now safe on block, when before it was massively punishable. The pushback on block has also been reduced. Now, in a bit of a role reversal here, the next target combo, Snow Rain, which is Vandy step, crouch medium punch into stand fierce punch. That move used to be -2 on block, and now it's -8. So where the previous one became safe on block, this one is now becoming punishable on block. Now, this one's definitely nerf territory. So her V skill is definitely one of her defining features. Depending on, you know, how you play, like certain people I know, it's definitely a crutch, and as such, you know, maybe not so much a crutch anymore. So on hit, it is now +2 instead of +3, so no more jab combo into it after, you know, connects. And now that said, it is now -8 on block instead of -7, so it is a bit more punishable depending on who you're fighting and the distance you hit at. A lot of more people, you know, some people have some difficulty, like say Abigail, if you hit from far away, he has very little options other than just jab it out, so it being -8 gives him a bit more leeway to work with, versus it being -7. 3 frames of recovery have been added to the move, so if you whiff it, it's all that much more whiff punishable, and the V gauge you gain from successfully countering an opponent has been reduced. So all in all, it's just nerfs across the board. Now, was this one of the better V skills in the game? Absolutely. And is it still worthwhile? Yeah, it's still worthwhile. But it'll definitely sting, because that's one of her signature moves, and it's been nerfed across the board. Now to the vanity steps. The light vanity step, it says here, moves total frames are now 43 frames instead of 34 frames. So any setup you had with this is basically dead if you're using this as like a timing measure or whatever have you, because the move is now massively more delayed when it comes to total frames. And it says now also her moves now move further forward with this move. So anything you do with this move, I'm assuming that's a light stab there, it'll go further than it did before. Her hurtbox while moving forward has been decreased, and the cancel window into silver edge has been widened, meaning it's a bit easier to get. So that is something at the very least. And going directly from the light kick 1 to the heavy kick 1, it says here, heavy vanity step, she can now steer slightly in the air while doing it. So currently as it stands, it's always a fixed arc, so maybe it'd be like a bit like a Vega wall dive or something, where she has slight air control over it, and that's pretty cool. So you might be able to now, you know, force into a fake cross-up situation if you have some air control, and you can use it kind of like a Vega get a wall dive. The last vanishing step to talk about is the light and medium kick EX version, as in, depending on which kick combination the move changes, but so is this light kick, medium kick. It says the cancel window into silver edge has been widened. So right here, if you see my timing, it can be a bit hard sometimes, you know, especially not a natural column player, to get the button, so you'll have more time to go into silver edge from it. And now going directly into silver edge, the cancel window from silver edge into a critical art has been widened. So you can go silver edge into your super, and depending on how fast you are, it can be a little difficult, so you just have a bit more time to do it. And also states if silver edge hits as an anti-air, the time the opponent stay airborne after it has been changed. Now, it doesn't say change for lesser, change for greater, but assume for the best in this situation that they'll be up in the air maybe a bit longer so we can get some sort of follow-up. Moving on to her super move, it says here that her super, the hitbox of the move has been extended upwards. So I'm assuming, simply put, that this move has better use as an anti-air. Before, you know, it's quite linear, so maybe not the best anti-air, but now if you catch someone doing a really sloppy jump, it'll work just fine, hopefully. Now on the counters, first up here, I'm assuming this is a bug fix, it says that the opponents will no longer be able to recover their stun while this move is hitting them. So it would just be like any other move in the game, you can't recover stun while being hit. Now on to the low EX and non-EX versions, they're getting damage buffs. So damage used to be 180, it'll now be 200 for the non-EX version, and for the EX version, Used to be 240 damage and now has been increased to 260 damage. And finally, the V trigger here, it says you will get increased meter gain for hitting the V trigger. It seems to be a case across most of the characters. So overall, Colin, I gotta say, slight nerf. There's a couple of nice little things in there, but overall, like stuff like the V skill being hit, you know, her jumping attack was a little bit unga bunga, if you want to use that term here. You could get very belligerent with it, and losing that one last active frame where she hits you like basically with the tip of her foot, which is near impossible to anti-air. So that's going to hurt her game plan overall. I still think she's incredibly solid, don't get me wrong, but some of the more incredibly straightforward parts of her game plan, let's put it that way, have been nerfed. Going on to Ed, first change here we have here is forward throw. Does increased damage, currently does 120, will be moved to 130 damage, and the old circumstances after landing. Ed's one of the better throw loop characters, and basically say goodbye to the throw loop. Next up is a backdash change. Now, this is pretty unique, at least among most of the characters, and changes haven't really affected forward dashing or backdashing, but his backdash, he goes quite far and quite fast, so this is going to be a nerf, unfortunately. The backdash now takes 23 frames instead of 21, so it's 2 frames slower. And it says here the distance moved has been changed. Doesn't say what exactly, but assume changed for the worst. Stand medium kick has been affected by the change that says it can hit foes behind them, so it can now be used as an anti-cross-up measure. Standing heavy kick, the damage has been reduced, so currently does 90, will now do 80. However, the distance when you get the crush counter has been decreased. So before, if you got your crush counter and you were like very far away, if you were like the exact tip, it'd be hard to get any kind of real follow-up. So they're going to spin out less far away now, so making it more reasonable to get a real follow-up after your crush counter. Crouching medium punch is now +5 on hit instead of +4. Meaning, if you get a counter hit, you can go directly into stand medium kick, you know, maybe of dubious use, but it exists. And the move is now +3 on block instead of +2. So this move is, you know, it's already halfway decent, but now it's going to get real belligerent as you can just kind of go into whatever you want afterwards. Psycho Spark, that's forward medium punch here. This part of the move, not the fireball follow-up, but the first part of the move is now -2 on block from -3. So before, -3 means, you know, some people in the cast could punish it on block, and now nobody in the cast can punish it on block. And this move has some use due to the super high amount of active frames for Oki. So overall, this makes it really useful. This is a pretty decent sized buff, actually. And our final change here is Snico Snatcher, the V skill. It now is no longer to be back roll recovered at all on hit. So that means you have to stand tech or nothing, but Ed is now going to be in your face, especially in the corner, but generally for the most part here, Ed, he's going to be able to basically get Oki now off this no matter what. So that's a pretty big change. This is definitely going to work in his favor. So now if you just toss it out, like it is negative if it gets blocked, sure, but even the basic version, you know, because I know everyone wants to go for the big Grand Slam charge version into combo or whatever, but this move now has real value and real use on the base uncharged version because you'll always get a wake up Oki on it. Overall, gotta say, big buffs for Ed. Not world changing buffs, it's not going to move him massively up the tier list or anything, but it's all really solid quality of life changes, and he's definitely going to be better for it overall. Now, moving on to Abigail, the hero, the savior of Street Fighter V. Definitely my favorite character overall. He's got a mountain of buffs. I know a lot of people think Abigail's very silly in a multitude of ways, but honestly, it couldn't be argued he wasn't that great of a character. So he got buffs and he definitely needs them. So first up here, it has to do with hurtbox changes. So Abigail, his crouching hurtbox against throws has been changed, and his airborne hitbox while being juggled has changed. Now Abigail, you know, stands to reason, he's quite a bit larger than most of the other characters. So it did cause some issues when it came to, like, you know, juggling some, and for some basic combo stuff didn't work on him the same as everyone else. So hopefully that should be unified across the board. Now next up here is his throws. His throws, hurtbox when whiffing a normal throw has been changed. So same deal here, it's probably just coming in line with all the other characters in the game. Now next up here we have standing leg kick. The startup has been shortened, so now starts up in 5 frames instead of 6. So definitely a big buff. Is very core for a lot of his Oki stuff, a lot of general pressure, and it's very core to his game plan in general. So having it 1 frame faster, definitely a big buff for him. Standing heavy kick, it says distance are sent flying For standing heavy kick, says here the distance the opponents are sent flying have been changed for both regular and crush counter hits. It does not say, if they go flying further, they go flying less. It's just been changed. So if they go flying further, it's definitely a nerf. If they are closer, it's a buff. We'll have to find out. On the other note here, it says airborne juggle points have been relaxed, meaning you can use this now when they're airborne after certain hits, and it'll actually combo. Next up, we have crouching light punch. So just like standing light kick, the move has had its active startup shortened, so it now starts up in 5 frames instead of 6 frames. And also the active frames have been increased, so it now has 3 active frames instead of 2. Big buff. He definitely uses that as a big pressure tool, keep away tool, and just all around everything. And the fact that his jabs were all so slow to begin with, was a bit of a crime. So now all of his jabs are at least 5 frames, because he had the only jabs really over that. So it's been a bit unified, and just a big buff for Abigail. Can't really say more. And going right on to big buffs here, and this is probably my single favorite buff out of all of them, crouching light kick. So it is now on hit +5 instead of +3. So Abigail, the only way he could do something simple like this was on counter hit. So if he wanted a basic 2-hit jab confirm, he had to have a counter hit no matter what. So now he can go, like say, crouch light kick into stand light punch or into crouch light punch, but he can get a 2-hit light confirm like every other character in the game. He doesn't have to rely on a counter hit for it, so it brings him in line with all the other characters of the game, and I gotta say, my single favorite change. So crouching heavy punch has quite a few changes here. First up, it says the juggling situation when hitting an airborne opponent has changed, and also when it's used as a crush counter. It doesn't illuminate what has changed in any way, shape, or form, simply that it has changed. So I can't really, expound or really think about it because they're not giving me much info to work here with. However, it does say it will not crush counter unless it hits on the first or second active frame. Meaning if you're using it, like say as an anti-air move, even though it's not necessarily a great anti-air move, but it's very unlikely that it'll crush counter if it hits. It is now most likely going to crush counter when you're using it as like a proper punish after Dragon Punch or something like that. Also, the move startup has been reduced by 1 frame. Used to start up in 12 frames, will now start up in 11 frames. Crouching heavy kick now has 2 active frames instead of 1 on the first hit. So that first hit right there only has a single active frame, now it has 2. It's kind of nothing much more than that. It'll be a little easier to hit with the first part now, and that's all there is to it really. And going directly from that, we now have the jumping medium kick. So that's his cross up here. So the move was always a bit wonky, especially against crouching people. I had some difficulty hitting smaller crouching people. So the move now has 5 active frames instead of 3 active frames. So 2 more active frames. So it'll be a lot more consistent now, and hopefully it'll be a bit easier to hit people who are crouching. Next up we have Abby Lift, that's forward fierce punch. It says the V trigger version juggle state has been changed. Doesn't state if it's changed for the worse or for the better, so we'll have to speculate on that, I guess. But it has been changed. Now going onwards here, the Hungabi High, that's his V skill parry. It says for both low and high versions, the airborne juggle points have been relaxed. Now I'm taking this to mean you can get a bit more of a follow-up, like say potentially you can go directly into EX EX flip, and then go into your Abigail punches from that after a V skill. I can't prove it right now, but the fact it says relax just means there's definitely going to be more juggle possibilities after it. His V trigger has been extended, so the rate that it drains will be slightly slower than it currently does. Now, whenever you do like a charge punch, I'm sure it's gonna, it's gonna drain just as hard. But while you're just walling around in neutral, it will drain a bit slower, and that's pretty handy to have. Now, going on to the Abigail punches, they've all been changed in some manner. The light punch one specifically says the distance the opponent sent flying after the final hit has been changed. It doesn't say further or not, but it does launch them very far away, basically launches them full screen. So since Abigail's basically got nothing but buffs, I would hope it's a bit closer than normal. And now it says across all the board here, the juggle properties of the moves have been changed. One example I saw in the Capcom Cup build is you do this and it would all connect. So currently that does not connect, so normally you would do something like this into light punch slam, and overall if you can get an Abigail punch after it would just be more damage, so that'd be a damage buff. Now going onwards here, when only the first hit lands, he cannot be flipped out of. So I'm assuming when the first hit connects, sometimes there'd be situations, very rarely, where the follow-ups would not work. So I'm assuming now if that first hit connects, no matter what, it's going to work all the time. Now onto the command grabs. Like everyone else, it is being nerfed. So both the regular command grab here, the half circle back kick, and his run into grab, both of them, if you whiff the move, it'll be 8 additional frames of recovery animation, meaning you're that much more likely to get punished. Next up, a change I'm very happy to see here. The dynamite punches from the run, and this is both regular and EX, the pushback on block has been increased. So the move is still incredibly negative, but for many characters, since the move is so negative, even if you hit them at the absolute tip of the move, they can still get like a sweep punish or whatever on you. So hopefully that means if you space the move correctly, you at the very least can get your little bit of chip and be safe. Because as it stands, the move is, outside of just mashing EX for the armor and getting your hit, the move is kind of useless, especially the regular version is totally useless. So hopefully, at the very least, it'll be like spacing for chip, and it'll have its use there. Now, this one's an odd one because the phrasing is very odd and I can't really decipher it, but if you let his EX run go, you can see he kind of steps on your toes after a while and then he'll do the punch eventually. So it says here the circumstances of what happens when Abigail steps on his opponent's feet during a continued EX Nitro run have been adjusted. As for what these circumstances mean, I couldn't begin to tell you. Perhaps they all naturally combo into each other, that'd be neat, but that's very unlikely. So we'll have to wait and see. But overall, I gotta say, I am incredibly happy with these Abigail changes. For the most part, none of these changes are really devastating in any way, shape, or form. But it's mostly the part where all of his lights are much quicker, and the fact he has a natural combo from crouch light kick, because he only has one 4-frame move, and this is it. So, like, yeah, these moves are now free. This and stand light kick are now 5 frames, but as far as 4-frame goes, this is all he had. So the fact this is a natural combo starter now is such a big deal to me. I'm a big fan of it. Gotta say, I'm super happy. Just to gush for a second, I complained earlier about how Vega nerfs made me quit Street Fighter V. Abigail's basically bringing me back into Street Fighter V. I love this character. And these quality of life changes are all just fantastic. Because, he definitely struggled. He definitely, thanks to the trigger, had, some of the best comeback mechanics of a lot of the cast. But other than that, I'm just so happy with these changes. And so we basically reached the end of this series. So Menat does have a new move where if the orb is out, she can detonate it, and it'll basically a giant explosive hitbox from wherever the orb currently stands, and then it'll return to her. And as for Ziku, he's one of those characters, he has exactly one change, and it's one of those things where it says it adjusted the move collision box during movement, which I could not begin to tell you what that actually means. Ziku, he was definitely created with, a lot of these changes in Season 3 in mind, so he's effectively untouched. So Menat does have a brand new move, but other than that, also she's for the most part untouched other than having a new V-trigger as well. So overall, that's everything I have to say. This is my complete breakdown of all the characters. I will say, now that I've gone through everything, a lot of things where it says, hitboxes have been changed. A lot of that seems to be dealing with moves that are both basically either jump-ins or moves that are kind of coded to be anti-air moves. So overall, I take that to mean that jump-ins are going to be worse in Season 3. Which, a lot of people definitely complained about jump happy stuff in Season 2 and 1. And then also, on the flip of that, a lot of people complain, well, then anti-air jabs are too strong. So hopefully we'll hit a nice happy balance with that. That moves that are not jabs, that are coded to be anti-airs, will work as intended. But, 3-frame reactionary jabs, anti-air will kind of go the way of the dodo, while jumps overall will maybe be less strong. But anyways, I have high hopes for where Season 3 is going. The people who did get nerfed didn't get devastatingly nerfed like a lot of the Season 2 characters did, and there seems to be at least, less nonsensical nerfs. Like people like Zangief, I have no idea why they nerfed him. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. But the people who have been nerfed, The nerfs have not been devastating. They're still going to keep the strength. Like someone like Balrog is still going to be very good. Balrog, a lot of his more, linear thinking stuff, like, tap and all that, just like hold it and just go for it. That's not going to work quite the same way it did, but Balrog is still going to be a good character without that stuff. And the people who needed some small buffs got some small buffs, like someone like Ryu, he should have been buffed more, but Chun-Li, she got good buffs. My boy Abigail got good buffs. Some people maybe should have got more like a Vega, but whatever. Overall, I'm quite happy with the changes. So thank you very much for watching this. I'm sure this is probably going to be my longest video of the date. Go out and play some Street Fighter.